Head to Knoxville, don't be late. Baker's Live, it's gonna be great. June 5th and 6th, mark your date at Dollywood, we'll celebrate. Meet Baker and more cool friends. Live show magic that never ends. Come to Dollywood, feel the vibe. With great people there, it's gonna be a ride. Rides, fun, and meet and greet. Baker and pals, the crew's so sweet. Get ready for laughs, cheers, and thrills. Knoxville's the place, it's giving chills. Meet Baker and more cool friends. Live show magic that never ends. Come to Dollywood, feel the vibe. With great people there, it's gonna be a ride. June 5th and 6th, don't miss the fun. Meet Baker and friends, it's second to none. Baker and friends, it's second to
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, whoever you are. What, if any, you might be? And isn't that the question we have to ask ourselves? What is it we are? Why are we here? And why is mail always delivered this late? Questions? I'm just asking questions. Welcome back. Hey, Brokenhearted, and Jemima, and Rachel, Suey, and Lori. Yeah, P's tickle everything. And Pixie's gotten out of bed. Good morning, Pixie. Dallas Born. And Nightbird is making sure we know Boston, Brett, Dallas Born is lurking. Lori Wallace have 91% swayshare. Starting the afternoon of hot. Why am I in the future? Because you live in a fictitious country that doesn't align with the rest of the world. That's why. The dome in Ohio, where Australia is situated, has a different time clock because back when they put up the lights, they made the cycle wrong. That's all I can say. That's the reason why. Yeah, we had a 99 yesterday, but 91 is pretty good swayshare. Hey, Helen from Holland. And who did we just get rated by Mo, or who rated us? I saw some rate come in and then it went away. Welcome to Fairy Tale Hour with Baker. It was Mo. Hey, Mo Riders. Hey, Anima, Rumpy. That's not what it says. It's what it says when I read it. Hey, Slooty Goosey. How are we doing? I feel sorry for Mo that she's covering that Bass case. I looked at it, looked at some of the updates, and it's horrible. I really don't like it. Well, I am only here to enlighten people and update you with the most specific knowledge you can have on everything geographical, mineral. How's that song from Pinafore? I know everything about animals and minerals. It's been too long since I watched Pinafore last time. And this case, slow going. I think they're wasting a whole heck of a lot of time. But they got some good answers in the end. And hopefully it'll move faster. We're going back to the dock they had on yesterday. So if it's going to be... I have a hard time with this case because it is really boring sitting here just listening to the same questions over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because I'm hoping that something new will come in and something interesting. I thought when they brought up those text messages that, yes, we have a coroner banging a sheriff. Nope, not really. They just didn't like the defense. Hey, I follow the Karen Reed case where the lead investigator hates the defense attorney as well, so it's nothing new. Plan fan. Swear jar. Bib made me say a bad word yesterday. Well, you are not the only one because... oh, and by the way, the motions to dismiss have, of course, all been impounded. So even the one that they gave them with the redacted information have been impounded. So we're not going to learn, at least not now, what if any arguments the defense had to impound them. A little annoying. I did the rewatch of the trial on Trial TV Live. Oh, I didn't watch it. I just fell on it and I saw, oh, that's interesting, a bench trial to try and get it an appeal. The case looked quite interesting. Apparently, it was a hoe who got raked. And was it because he wanted to save the farm? And then we found out maybe the farm is in a trust. So I thought, oh, we're going to have a lot of information coming in. But it's just, did you say this as the first trial? Where I am at a layman, we only see new cases. But you can go to the level above where you get all the appeal cases. And appeal cases is just reading the testimony from the lower level and said, is this what you said? And I kind of feel like this is what's going on, where you're just rehashing all the arguments they already had. And then every once in a blue moon, they ask a question that's new. So I don't find the flow is really going with this case. So again, I'm glad that Julia will come on tomorrow and talk Coburger with me tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern. We will try it because I don't know anything about the Idaho 4 other than little tidbits. So she'll come on and give me a lesson on what's going on in that case. So we'll do that tomorrow afternoon. No, it was maybe they couldn't be sure it was related to the case that had just ended, but they believe it had to do with that. Seeing the names of the people who had been unalived and who did the unaliving, it could have been either clan or gang related. In Europe, when you see names, last names like that, it's normally because it has something to do with either gangs or internal conflicts in families. What is impounded? It's just that they're not allowed to share it. It's there's a gag order on it. You can't share the motions. It's kind of like the 3,600 pages from the FBI. There is a court order that they can't be shared. And I love that Bev didn't know that yesterday, even though she has been part of this case the entire time, and even told the defense, you have to remember there's a federal court order what can be disclosed in this case. So interesting. And I just got a video from Baby Baker. He's watching cases with his mom, and I'm thinking, they are watching the case we had last week, and I'm thinking, is that good entertainment for a 4-month-old? But hey, Baby Baker, he's having a little bit of a, do you call it being mom sick? So only mom will do right now. He's a little under the weather. Yes, I had the same problem. I tried to draw it the other day. And I have a hard time that, because it looks like it's on 2 different planes, and I still haven't heard. Well, court is back. Jesus, it's loud.
Thompson, are we picking back up with Dr. Nye? We are. Okay. Dr. Nye?
She's not watching live. She's watching the trial from last week. So.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'll swear you back in since it's another day. You swear the testimony you're about to give will be true and correct? I do. Go ahead and have a seat.
Yeah, he got life in prison, right?
Good afternoon, Dr. Nye.
Good afternoon.
When we left off on your testimony yesterday, we were talking about some of the hypotheses that you considered in your evaluation in this case. Do you remember that?
Oh, that makes more sense. Try to bore me to death. I thought, who's biting you? Have you gone to Jamie's house? Because Jamie, she's a known biter. So could have been Jamie biting you.
Testimony?
Yes.
And we had talked about your one hypothesis that you considered, which is that the hypothesis that these wounds that we've been talking about and Ms. Mullis's injuries were caused by someone swinging this corn rake into her body. Do you remember those questions in your testimony about those issues?
Yes.
I want to show you.
50 years. Hey, Maddie.
And I've shared these demonstratives with the state, Your Honor. I want to show you, for starters, demonstrative by.
No, it's just that the cop zeroed in on him, believed he was the guilty one, and they didn't really see any evidence to the contrary. And could he disprove that it could have been an accident? No. So I think that's the only important part of this morning, and that him and the coroner, who were very, very, very snippy with the defense, weren't big fans of the defense. That's what I got from it.
Can you rotate this 90 degrees? Actually, let's start with G. Do you see the figures on image G in front of you, Dr. Nye?
Yes.
And do these figures help you explain your testimony as to why you disproved the hypothesis that someone could not have swung the corn rake into Ms. Mullis's body?
Yes.
Can you explain how how demonstrative G illustrates that?
We were talking about an overhead swing. So this demonstrative, even though it's two-dimensional, shows that
with an overhead swing, the angle of entry of the tines does not match the diagnosed wound trajectories.
And is that true for those wounds A through D that have one trajectory and those wounds E through F that have another?
It's true for all of the wounds, yes.
All right. I want to also show you.
But didn't they testify that he said that the rake was going out that way? I don't know.
Another demonstrative K. Do these images also help explain your testimony that you disproved the hypothesis that someone could have swung the corn rake into Ms. Mullis's body?
Yes.
And can you explain how?
Similarly as the other diagrams do, this is essentially showing an overhead swing, and in various positions of erect to bending over to lying on the ground, the rake entry of the tines don't match the physical evidence, being the wound trajectories.
I want to also show you demonstrative L. Does this demonstrative help illustrate your testimony from yesterday that someone could not have swung, that you disproved the hypothesis that someone caused these injuries or could have caused these injuries by swinging the corn rake into Ms. Mullis's body?
Yes, this is in reference to the lateral swing.
All right, and how does this image illustrate that concept?
Swinging it sideways doesn't generate the wound trajectories diagnosed by Dr. Cruz.
One question I wanted to ask you yesterday, and I know that we talked some about different positions with respect to your testimony about this hypothesis. Would it have been possible to create the wound pattern?
The ME said it didn't matter what way. That was the ME, because she said it didn't matter with the trajectory of the wounds. But this is a defense expert who claims that the direction matters.
Pattern in the wound trajectories that Ms.
Recovery addict had the entire day yesterday.
Mullis had if the person who caused these injuries was sitting or kneeling.
Sitting or kneeling behind them, you mean?
Let's start with that. Would that have been possible?
So looking at the length of the rake and Mrs. Mullis's anthropometrics and the location of the injury, that would not match, no.
And what about if Ms. Mullis were kneeling or sitting? Would that be possible?
Same thing, the angle of entry wouldn't match the wound trajectories.
Thank you. I think we can take that image down.
No, I got so mad watching the Ken Reed trial, so I went on Discord, yelled at people instead. Well, Sue yelled at me.
We talked yesterday about the hypothesis that one or more of the injuries was caused by someone pushing this rake into Amy Mullis's back. And I wanted to ask you if you considered the hypothesis that someone kicked this rake somehow into Ms. Mullis's back to cause these injuries.
I don't recall us talking about the rake being pushed.
All right. Well, let me start by asking you about whether if you consider the hypothesis that someone kicked this rake into Ms. Mullis's back.
Yes.
And what did you determine about whether that hypothesis was possible?
That it's unlikely.
And why is that?
As we discussed earlier yesterday, Ms. Mullis, based on the wound pattern, the spacing of the wounds, as we discussed, she's hyperextended when the injury occurred.
And you described yesterday hyperextending, meaning?
Right, so she's hyperextended, shoulders back, rotated. If someone's on the ground, that is an active position to have to hold. So you'd have to then place the rake in that position, keep the rake there while she doesn't move, and then actively kick it. that is not a feasible hypothesis.
So a second ago, I want to make sure that I spoke correctly. We had talked about the hypothesis that someone pushed Ms. Mullis onto the rake. That's what we discussed yesterday. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
All right. I do want to discuss with you this other hypothesis, whether someone pushed this rake into Ms. Mullis's back, meaning they held the rake and pushed it into her. Did you consider that hypothesis?
Yes.
And were you able to prove or disprove that hypothesis?
I was able to disprove it.
How?
That comes into now, if we give the mechanism of the injury, meaning the rake was in the appropriate position to cause the diagnosed wounds, keeping in mind that she's hyperextended, the rake has to be angled obliquely to her body, and the rake handle is essentially parallel with the long axis of her body. Then you have to consider, as I talked about, magnitude. So I considered magnitude at that point.
Did you, and so what were your conclusions about whether it would be possible to have the magnitude of force necessary to cause those injuries through that mechanism?
There is not enough force with this blunt object to push the rake into Ms. Mullis's body.
How do you know that?
Based on my investigation.
And what about your investigation led you to conclude that?
Biomechanical and scientific literature that talks about the penetration threshold for blunt objects into the body.
And what does that literature say about that topic?
What it says is I need about close to 75 pounds of force for one of these tines to enter the body without the clothing. When you add on the clothing, then we're over, 90 pounds. And then the fact that there's 3 tines going in, then you have to distribute the forces, so you're multiplying that now by 3. There is biomechanical literature that talks about the push force, and there's different kinds of pushing. If you're holding it against a body and you're constantly pushing, or you're actually pushing with acceleration. So if you use the pushing with acceleration, that's a more severe scenario compared with the constant push, because now you're adding acceleration in. The maximum push force by males is about 138 pounds. So that is not enough force to penetrate the clothing and her body.
I did tricep push downs with 100 pounds today, 110 pounds today. Just bragging.
And again, is that true whether someone is applying the constant pushing that you described or doing the pushing with acceleration?
That is true, because if it doesn't meet the threshold with the acceleration, it's not going to meet it with the constant pushing.
Were you able to determine any hypothesis where
Everyone is being paid. State employees doesn't work for free. I know it's a big surprise. She's still under every rule that is in a courtroom. If she lies, she can be perjured. She is a doctor. She will be losing her license and everything if she lies. She's not evil because she speaks on behalf of the defense. It's her job. Just like the ME wasn't evil just because she didn't like the defense. It's her job. Both of them are getting paid. One of them is getting paid by the taxpayers. Well, I don't know if he has a taxpayer-funded defense, but it's totally normal, and it doesn't mean anything. We are all of us are loving the ARCA guys. Do you think ARCA did it for free, so we can't trust them because they get paid? Experts get paid. They do the job they are asked for. They have to do this under the pains of perjury. And she is not lying. She could look favorable on some evidence and not on others. But it's, yes.
a person would be able to push the rake into Ms. Mullis's back to cause these injuries?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
In considering this hypothesis, the hypothesis of whether these injuries were caused by someone pushing the rake into Ms. Mullis's back. Were you able to envision any scenario where that was possible?
That's very, very rare. But again, I hate that question. How much were you paid? They never asked the ME, how much salary do you get per month from the state?
No, because that's already, even with 2 tines, we're not reaching the necessary threshold. So again, I said a very, very conservative minimum. It's greater than that is 90 pounds. Multiply that by 2 tines, and that's...
So she has more knowledge about this than a doctor. That's good to know.
Going to be more than 180, and the very maximum push force is less than that.
In the literature that you looked at on this issue, what was the blunt force object that the literature discussed this concept with respect to?
Screwdrivers.
Is that flathead screwdrivers like the screwdrivers we were discussing yesterday?
Yes.
And it was your testimony yesterday that this corn rake is blunter than a flathead screwdriver?
It's blunter than a 1/4 inch wide flathead screwdriver.
Thanks for that clarification. I appreciate that. Did you consider the hypothesis that Ms. Mullis's injuries were caused by Ms. Mullis falling down onto the rake?
Yes.
And could you disprove this hypothesis?
I could not disprove it. Actually, I proved it.
Interesting.
Would looking at a demonstrative assist you in explaining this testimony?
Yes.
All right, I want to show you demonstrative J.
I just think it's such a... Do they think the lawyers do it for free, or the jury? Well, they do it for next to nothing. But it's just such a weaselly way to ask people because, of course, you pay for expertise.
Can you explain how it is you concluded that, how it is you determined that you could not disprove the hypothesis that these injuries were caused by Ms. Mullis falling down onto the rake?
So again, we talked about yesterday how lining up the rake with wounds A, B, and C, and D, we know that A, B, and C occurred first from the analysis that I talked about yesterday. So lining up the rake with the rake lying flat on the ground, tines up, if you line up those tines with the wound paths, that demonstrates that when she falls, that this generates the mechanism necessary to cause the injury. So now that I showed mechanism, then I analyzed force.
All right, and I want to get to force in a minute, but just sticking with mechanism for a second. You talked yesterday in your testimony about the concept that if someone had pushed Ms. Mullis, so stood and pushed her onto the rake, there would have been rotational forces that would have sent her at least somewhat in a horizontal direction. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, it's rotational as well as horizontal velocity.
And thank you. Why wouldn't that concept have prevented Ms. Mullis from falling down onto the rake in the way that you're just describing you could not disprove?
Well, when you have horizontal and rotational acceleration that pushes the body across, basically, if you think about parallel to the floor and rotating about that axis, when you contact the rake, because the rake is top heavy, it's going to flip. In the falling situation, when somebody falls from standing height and falls backwards, her body will contact the tines first, and then her lower body essentially pins the rake down with the rake handle down, which prevents it from flipping.
We're talking about a 4-tined rake and 6 wounds. So this hypothesis requires Ms. Mullis to have fallen on this rake more than once. Isn't that right?
Yes.
How could that have occurred from a type of force and direction of force perspective?
Well, as discussed, the A, B, and C wounds are created first because we've excluded that E and F and D being created first for the reasons we talked about. After A, B, and C are created, if you're her trying to get up, she could roll to her right. The rake handle prevents her from sitting up straight. So sitting on her buttocks because it's too long, it's longer than her torso. So for her to get up, she'd have to roll over. And if you roll over to your right and not to your left, because otherwise you're rolling over the rake, if you roll over to your right, essentially you're causing tensile loading, and you can pull out that time 3, which is in wound C, because it's not as deep as A and B. Right? Remember that wound C is 3 and I think 1/2 inches deep. So if you can pull wound time 3 out of wound C just by attempting to get up and maneuvering, trying to get the rake out of her. The rake stays in the clothes at that point, and in her movement, the rake then moves within the clothes, causing the abrasion above wound D. Even if she gets up onto her hand, she doesn't have to get all the way up to standing, not even to her knees yet, getting up to leaning up on her hand and then falling backwards to get wound D.
I want to stop you right there where you've caused wound D, and I'm going to show you another demonstrative, which is demonstrative F. Does this demonstrative help illustrate your testimony about how Ms. Mullis could have fallen on this rake more than once?
Yes.
And can you explain how it does that?
Yes. So basically, her pulling on the rake handle to try and extract the rake from her body reorients the tines upward. With A and B.
That's my problem too, because it's going all the way through. We know there's the mom lifting the car off a kid syndrome, but still.
Still in her body, that is then consistent with the tines moving around, as Dr. Hammers discussed yesterday, with the external and internal wound pattern showing that the tines are moving, tines 1 and 2 are moving in wounds A and B. Once you reorient the rake and she falls on it, then you have the mechanism to generate E and F.
From the data that you had from Dr. Cruz and Dr. Hammers about the pattern of wounds A for F, did this hypothesis match?
It matches everything, yes.
And from the depth of the wounds as measured by Dr. Cruz, did this hypothesis match?
Yes, the A and B are deepest, and they stayed within her, and E would be the next deepest.
In terms of the physical characteristics of the rake and the spacing of the rake's tines, does this hypothesis match for all of Ms. Mullis's wounds on wounds A through F?
Yes.
Yes.
You had talked earlier about Ms. Mullis's clothing. From your investigation and analysis of the clothing, did this hypothesis work?
Yes, with the less holes in the clothes relative to the holes in her body, and understanding that time 3 doesn't come out of the clothing to cause wound D, yes, it all fits.
And from the issue that you were discussing a minute ago of Ms. Mullis's back being hyperextended, at least on the right side, does that fact and that concept, does that fit with this hypothesis?
Yes, even when you move the rake in this position that we see here, you reorient the rake handle down by her left hip, trying to extract it. That'll cause, again, the back skin to basically compress together.
From your review of the layout of the shed and the physical characteristics of the shed,
One of them punctured her implant, one of her implants, so it must have gone at least close to the lung.
did this hypothesis fit?
Yes.
How?
The small spacing, there's not a lot of room in there, so we talked about that for the swinging scenarios, but there is enough room to fall and refall on this implement.
Were you aware of evidence in the record that there was blood on Ms. Mullis's hand and blood on the handle of the rake?
That's what I reviewed in the records, yes.
And did that information fit with this hypothesis?
That fits with this hypothesis, yes.
How does it?
So she has to grab the handle to reorient the handle in the manner that we see in this figure. in order to sustain ENF. So grabbing that handle with blood on her hand would transfer to the handle.
You told us a moment ago that, and I think discussed this yesterday, that first you have to determine the type and the direction of the force to determine if those mechanism issues fit with the hypothesis. And is it your testimony that those factors fit with this hypothesis?
Yes, the type and direction of forces in this fall scenario fits with all the injuries.
All right, and in your method of analysis, you would then go on to determine this question of magnitude, whether there could be enough force here to cause the injuries in this hypothesis. Is that right?
Stop playing with the audio.
So, in the hypothesis you've described, we're talking about a couple of different kinds of falls. Is that right?
Yes.
What kinds of falls are we thinking about in this hypothesis?
I analyzed a fall from standing, a fall from a lower height attempt while she's trying to attempt to get up the first time, and a fall from, say, knee height if she's trying to get the rake out.
You were here for Dr. Cruz's testimony that she did not believe that a fall could be enough to cause these kinds of injuries. Did you hear that testimony?
Yes.
From a magnitude perspective, whether the fall from standing, a fall from kneeling could cause these injuries, what is your conclusion as a biomechanical engineer?
That there is sufficient amount of force.
And how do you make that determination?
Using engineering and laws of physics.
And can you tell, did you have to perform calculations to figure that out?
Yes.
So tell us what you did to make that determination.
So the fall height, calculating a fall height from standing height, you consider conservation of energy principles. So the gravitational potential energy has to equal the kinetic energy. So the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form to another. So at the tide of hop.
I think this is wrong. You can just listen to what the people who were at the crime scene told you. Then you can kind of look at a debris field that no one really marked off, and then you can say, oh, there was a shoe at the scene. That means impact by a car. She is absolutely not making sense right now. This has no...
I thought you were being serious for a second, and I was like, sir, are you telling her she doesn't know what she's talking about?
Jamie, I know from some of the highest trained police detectives in the U.S., even though that you didn't know where the debris was, and you were told, does that change your opinion? You just said, no. 140-hour course is way more efficient than some biomechanical. What do they know? Newton's law?
I was getting ready to hear you out and then yell at you.
Yeah, and there's butt handling of the volume knob going on.
The height of the fall, that is the potential energy, and as she's falling, you can calculate the kinetic energy using rotational energy combined with linear energy. Once you have that, you can isolate for the velocity and then estimating a stopping distance.
Pixie, you are real. You're just living in Ohio and thinking because it's so horrible that you are in Australia.
You can calculate an impact force.
I don't have anything against Ohio.
To make those determinations about what those different factors were that go into this consideration, were you relying on principles of engineering, of biomechanical engineering in your field?
Principles of fundamental engineering and science, yes.
All right, and so for the fall from the standing height first, would the force have been of a great enough magnitude to allow Ms. Mullis to be impaled on this rake?
Yes.
And what about from the lower height that you described, from being on her knees?
From you mean the first time she tries to roll over, or which one?
So in the hypothesis you've described, the first time that Ms. Mullis would have fallen on the rake in this hypothesis, she's falling from a standing height, is that right?
Yes.
And for a later...
Well, again, this is a biomechanic engineer. This is the first strong testimony I've heard why he should have a new case
Oh
because
yeah.
then we have to see how she does on cross. We have to remember this is the defense, this is the side that called her. So we have to see how she holds up on cross.
Yeah,
I think as you
agree.
described, she
This is
would be
good-
falling from a
this
lower
is good
height. Is
evidence.
that right?
Yes.
And so what about from that lower height?
Yeah.
When you did this calculation about the magnitude of the force, would there have been enough force generated in this hypothesis to have caused these injuries in the way that you've described?
Yes.
During your investigation, did you come across any physical evidence that did not fit with this hypothesis of Ms. Mullis falling onto the rake in the way that you've described?
No, every single piece of physical evidence supported this hypothesis.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
I mean, it's just the possibility. That's all it takes.
Yeah, but again, they have tried before, and they'll have to convince the judge that it's very likely it was an accident, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, maybe his appeal wasn't all that, you know, it's
In
easy.
the hypothesis that
You
you
know,
described
appeals
that
don't
you
get
couldn't
approved all that
disprove.
much.
Yeah.
You described the rake times that caused wound A and B, which I
Yes, that was that's incredible, Rand. They must have something, or else they wouldn't have gotten to this one. And I'm just saying, this testimony is the first evidence that have led me to believe why they have a snowball's chance in hell to get somewhere with this one.
think your testimony came first.
Yeah, the ME said she
This hypothesis would have
didn't,
stayed.
the angles of the wounds didn't matter to her. Like, that's a big
Yeah.
deal because you're trying to say that this is what happened.
Yeah.
You know, the
in
angles
Ms.
are a big
Melissa's
deal.
body as she tried to get up. Is that right?
Yeah, so A, B, and C happened first, and A and B stay within her body.
All right, and taking that factor into account, that the hypothesis that's how, testing the hypothesis of how this has occurred, you were able to determine in that scenario that there was enough force to have caused first the fall from a greater height and then the falls that you described that would have been from a lower height.
Yes.
Now, you heard Dr. Cruz's testimony earlier this week that she did not perform any experiments in reaching her conclusion that a fall would not have made these injuries possible. Did you hear that testimony?
Yes.
Have you conducted an analysis that allows you to reach the opinion that that hypothesis can't be disproven?
I've done an investigation that not only can't disprove it, but actually proves it.
And have you worked with forensic pathologists in conducting biomechanical evaluations in other cases?
Oh, yes, for sure.
The hypothesis that you've testified that you can't disprove, is that hypothesis unlikely from a biomechanical or a biomedical perspective?
No, it's completely feasible. We've analyzed all the work that went into this investigation to consider all the physical evidence, including the diagnosed wounds externally and internally, the measurements and dimensions and geometry, and again, intrinsic properties of the rake. Everything fits. So not only does the magnitude match, the mechanism matches. It all matches.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
It's not far-fetched at all.
Just two other questions, Dr. Nye. Is there anything in the opinions that you've given here yesterday and today in your testimony that is based on new science that's been developed since 2019?
No.
And are these opinions that you or someone else in the biomechanical field could have offered back in 2019 based on the state of the science then?
Yes.
All right. I have no other questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Nye.
Good afternoon, Mr. Duden.
How are you doing?
I'm well.
She testified she got up on her knees and tried to pull the rake out.
And I hope you are well too.
And it's possible. We don't know.
I want to start by talking a little
I
bit
don't know how long
about
she
your
was there.
background in biomechanics. Certainly, your resume speaks to that, but is it correct to say that you graduated with your PhD in mechanical engineering?
Bioengineering, essentially.
And when was that again?
2010.
And since that time, your primary focus, as you testified to yesterday and reflected in your CV, has focused on lower extremity injuries, right? And ocular, I believe.
Since that time, no. That's when I graduated. However, I've been a forensic biomechanical engineer for 15 years.
Oh, I'm sorry, about your publications specifically and the research that you've conducted. Has that predominantly focused on lower extremities, upper extremities, joints such as the knees? I believe you testified to yesterday.
Yes, my publications are focused on that, but I've worked in multiple areas.
Based upon a review of your most recent testimony offered in either a deposition or trial format, is this your first criminal case that you've consulted on specifically?
No.
Is it the only criminal case that's noted on the documentation of your trial testimony and depositions that was provided to Mr. Mullis's counsel?
I am not sure. The testimony list I have is for the last 4 years, but I don't really recall it.
Where have you testified for a criminal case?
I have not testified in a criminal case, but I've worked on criminal cases, multiple.
Through a consultation format, is that fair?
It starts out as consultation, but they don't, we talked yesterday, if I don't have an opinion that supports their case, I don't testify typically.
So when you first came into this case, it was to review Dr. Bowley's report,
common.
right?
Yeah.
I was a peer reviewer for Dr. Bully, yes.
And in that sense, you simply reviewed her report and then double-checked it, in your opinion, is that fair?
I think I work alongside, I basically listened to her her investigation along the way to make sure that she was following the scientific method and applying the laws of engineering and physics appropriately.
So your own investigation came after, however, correct?
That is.
Jamie, you said he pushed it back, but it's still there. You got racing stripes.
I see the racing stripes now. But it feels like he pushed the hairline part like back.
Yeah, he's missing that one. Yesterday or the day before, he had a big gap up here. But he should have fixed it in the break, just reapplied the hairspray.
Yeah.
Come on, fella, just take it off. It's just drawing more attention to your baldness when you do the comb over.
Yeah, it really does.
Because you see it and you think, oh, he's just have weird gray stripes in his hair. And then you see, nope, he's bald. You can do the white landing strip. It doesn't look good, but it's better than this. Or just take it off. Just do like Dave and keep this part shaved down.
Yeah. He might look good as a bald man. Who knows?
I don't think he would look good.
I don't think so either, but just trying to be nice.
Yeah, that's the Midwesterner in you.
You know.
Remember, if you have any complaints, 3 Midwestern guys must deliver them at Jamie's address.
Please don't
25 to 30
have
years old.
random people showing up to my house.
Correct.
And so as it relates to your investigation and your biomedical evaluation, was that first in September 2023 or June and July of 2023, I believe?
I don't remember timing. I'm sorry.
Okay. When you undertook your investigation, you visited the farm, fair?
I visited the farm.
How wide is the space of the red shed where the incident occurred?
Based on the police documentation, the pathway when you enter the door to the totes was about 2 feet, and then when you walk.
Yeah, he had a very, very hard fight against his baldness as well. That's right. Baron Corbin had some weird hair, and then he finally let it go.
Walk along, you turn 90 degrees, and you enter the pathway where the augers and the pet carrier were, and that was noted to be about 3 to 3.5 feet.
Did you take your own measurements when conducting your investigation?
No.
So no supplemental measurements were taken of the space in question?
No, from what I understand, they had taken, since the incident, it's an active farm, so they had taken things out and put it back in. So I had the documentation right after the incident from the police department.
So in that 2 feet of space, give or take for the walkway, where was the rake?
So the 2 feet was the walkway where she's found by the door. The space between the pet carrier and that space was about 3 to 3.5 feet, but there were 2 augers there.
So where was the rake when she was impaled? That's my question.
On the floor, in the area of the pet carrier is what I believe.
Okay, and where's that documented? Do you recall?
It's not documented there, but that's where the rake was found. I have no other documentation that indicates that the incident happened elsewhere.
Well, to be fair, the rake was found in her back, right?
Well, the rake was found in her back, but the photos have the rake on the ground in the shed.
So the location of where you believe she first became impaled in
You
the
don't
rake
even know
with
how.
the corn rake was backed by the pet carrier. Is that fair?
Based on the information, again, that doesn't really matter to me, but that would make sense.
Well, I'm trying to gauge it from a space perspective. Is it fair to say that your report does not outright include the calculations for force or magnitude as it relates to the injuries in question?
No, they do.
Your report details the force and magnitude
Oh,
measurements?
the actual dated report? No. I don't know, actually.
I believe it's in front of you.
Okay.
You can take a look as well.
Thank you. It's hard to remember because I have my notes file.
I mean, go use your state money and get yourself a biomechanical engineer
You're
to
correct.
fight
I don't
her.
actually have the numbers in there. I just
Yeah.
have the conclusion that it generates more than sufficient impact force.
But you're not able to know from reading your report, for instance, as to what amount of force was generated based upon your hypothesis, right?
The exact number,
Correct. Looking to your report, do you still have your second report in front of you?
yes.
Looking to, I believe, the first and second page specifically of your report. Let me know when you're there.
I'm here.
I believe that, directing your attention to page 1, your stated purpose of the letter is to provide your professional opinions based on your biomechanical investigation of an incident, and specifically as to the purpose of your investigation was to determine whether these diagnosed injuries were caused by an accidental fall on the corn rake or the rake being intentionally swung multiple times into her body. Did I read that right?
Yes.
So your evaluation was specifically to look at whether or not these injuries correlated or could have been caused by a fall. Fair?
My evaluation, that was part of my hypotheses, yes.
Nowhere else in your report do you detail any secondary hypothesis, though, correct?
Well, the secondary here is the swinging.
So, fair. And taking that into account, the evaluation looked at falling onto the corn rake, right?
Falling onto the corn rake, correct.
That's one. And the second one is whether or not it was swung into her multiple times.
Don't know
Fair?
what that is.
Fair.
You do not detail any other working hypothesis as it relates to whether or not it was pressed into her body, right?
In my report, no.
Nor do you actually mention in your report as to whether it could have been kicked or otherwise thrust, struck, what have you, into her body either, correct?
You're correct.
In looking to the actual data information you provided, I believe your evaluation looked only again at a fall from standing or knee height, falling onto the rake, or swinging it, correct?
When you say my evaluation, do you mean my notes?
I believe it's in your notes section, and I'm looking specifically at your numbered paragraphs 1 through 3.
Yes.
And so those only evaluate from a swinging or a falling standard, correct?
Not technically, because I provide my references, which give the information that you can compare the numbers to.
Well, you've never filed a supplemental report as to the information as to whether or not it was kicked into or back, correct?
I did not write a report about kicking.
And so when was the first time you evaluated it from that perspective?
From the kicking part?
Yes.
Oh,
I don't
interesting.
remember.
Well, I believe the first time it was mentioned here during testimony was yesterday, which you were in the room for, correct?
Well, Dr. Cruz had mentioned it in her deposition.
As to whether or not it was being pushed or kicked into her in her testimony on Monday. That's your statement?
Her testimony in the October 2023 deposition.
Was evaluated from a kick or push?
She had said she didn't know if the tines were entered into her body one by one, if they were pushed or kicked.
And to be fair, your report doesn't detail it from that perspective either, right?
My report does not discuss kicking.
And nor do your notes that were included with that report actually reference it from that perspective either, true?
For kicking, I mean, again, that's a trajectory standpoint. So if you talk about trajectory, then it doesn't specifically say kicking, no.
So there's nothing or no indication to believe that you had evaluated it from that perspective based upon your notes, correct?
I mean, I know that it's there.
But there's nothing based upon your notes provided or your reports that would detail that, correct?
Yeah, nothing in there says kicking, correct.
Looking at it now, how much magnitude would, how much force would be necessary to penetrate the codes in question? From
It's actually not true. It gets its name from the Danes and their fields, because Mark is field.
a forced push.
It's in here within the references that I provide.
The same reason why the state's ME didn't like the defense. It's opposition.
So it's 600 newtons, which equals to 138 pounds.
Where's that in your notes?
It's in the references that I give.
Could you point me to a specific place, please, Dr. Knight?
Sure.
don't want to interrupt the witness's testimony, but just because we want to make a record of what the witness is referencing, I think applicant intends to offer this as Exhibit 976, the document that the witness is looking at. We do just want to make a record of what the witness is actually seeing, since it's this other document.
976?
Yes, Your Honor. And we'll file a copy with the EDMS.
Mr. Duden, did you have any objection to that plan?
I have an objection to admitting the entirety of what would be admitted as 976, Your Honor, as it contains hearsay from other reports and would constitute an evaluative process. As for an improper evaluation, as for the actual calculations or page referenced that we've spoken about so far, I have no issue, Your Honor.
All right, well, maybe on the next break we can talk about what exactly 976 would constitute, see if you can come to an agreement on that. If not, we'll go from there, but I'll hold off on admitting that for now. We'll circle back.
It's still not the name of a king. It's the name of the inhabitants of the country. It's the Danes. It's not Dan the king. I don't think we ever had a king named Dan.
I think there was a question pending for Dr. Nye. Do you remember?
Yes.
Okay, you may go ahead and answer.
Sure. It's reference 5, Nolan, the first Nolan.
Of your supplemental notes or of your report?
Of my notes. The last page, have my references listed. And number 5, the reference number 5 gives you the max push force.
For stabbing attacks, correct?
Well, if you read the paper, it includes pushing.
Well, I'm just looking at it. It's forces generated in stabbing attacks is the one you're referencing, correct?
Oh, do you want the title? Forces required for a knife to penetrate, forces generated in stabbing attacks, an evaluation of the utility of mild, moderate, and severe scale.
Where would your notes indicate specifically other than a citation to an article on stabbing?
Well, if you go to the article and you get the value that's listed there, they basically compare stabbing to blunt activities, including
But that's not included in
double
your-
hand pushing, and then you compare it to the calculations that I provide.
It's not included in your calculations, though, correct?
It's not a calculation, it's the number that's listed in the reference.
It's not noted as a number or otherwise in your actual notes or application in this case, correct?
No, the reference is noted.
And I believe you testified yesterday, you disagree with the category to say you would believe that this isn't a stabbing case, correct?
This is not, she was not stabbed. Does not generate sufficient force.
So there's no way to know, based upon that citation alone, in your reports, for instance, that that would be the force required to penetrate the skin here, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
There's no way to know the force required to.
Yeah, there was an objection. The objection's overruled. The witness can continue to answer.
I'm sorry, can I get that question again, please?
Sure, and I'll rephrase it. Nowhere in your report is that mentioned from a numerical perspective, right?
It's just listed in the reference.
And nowhere in your application of actual numerical values, notes, calculations, et cetera, is it noted either, right?
No, that number's in the reference, and it's not a calculation, it's a measured empirical number that you take and you compare it to the calculations that I did.
Well, let's talk about, you did not do an accident reconstruction or an incident reconstruction in this case, did you?
I absolutely did.
Where is that specifically noted other than viewing the scene?
So the entire process of the investigation is an incident reconstruction.
Well, what I see is we've talked about it. You have two hypotheses, fair?
The two hypotheses I discussed in my report.
And as is common in your publication history, which I've reviewed too, you note limitations of the work and research you provide, right?
Specifically with regard to what?
When you are conducting research or experiments according to the guidelines of technical papers or research in your discipline, you are to note the limitations of what you can identify as a causal factor. True?
I think you need to be a little more specific for me, please.
Sure. I'll give you an example, perhaps. I believe you did research as it related to wear and tear of knee joints, correct?
That's not exactly, I think you need to be a little bit more specific or accurate. I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Is it part of the scientific process to note the limitations of what you are testing?
Yes, that's why I do conservative calculations.
That is not noted in your report either, though, is it?
It is. If you actually look at the calculations, you'll note that it's conservative.
For those that are just reading your report, Dr. Nye, it would not be known, though, would it?
Objection, Your Honor.
On what grounds, Your Honor?
As to who would read it, it's
First of all, okay to ask, where in your report can I find that number? And she says, well, it's a business fact that it takes 120 Newton meters or whatever it is. It's in my my notes to my report. But why did you go all, mommy, I'm bald, I'm gonna go yelly, and talk about knee injuries and what? Calm down. Your hair's not gonna grow back. It doesn't help yelling at this lady. And anyone who's going to read the report, it's not anyone who's going to read the report. It's the defense team and the state. And the state can hire someone to interpret it for them if they don't understand it.
And I'm sure he doesn't completely. I mean, that's a tough, like, subject to just learn on the fly, right? I would think
Yeah,
so.
and you have the state's money, so he'll just say, okay, get me a biomechanical engineer. Are these numbers correct? Yes, it takes 120 newtons to do that. No, it's not correct because it takes 140 newtons. That's the battle of the experts. But she has all the numbers in her appendixes to her report. So again, it's not gonna grow back. Let it go, buddy.
Depends on.
I wanna have him flail around and do the Donald Trump in a side wind.
Who the person is that's asking her to speculate on the knowledge of a reader.
It's filed in a legal proceeding, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I'm
witness
sure
can
he
answer if
knows.
she's able.
Enough,
I mean,
but,
anybody who
you know,
knew
not
basic
her
physics would
level.
know.
About your noted limitations as it applies to this case.
About my calculations being conservative, yes.
But that is, as I've said and asked, not noted in your report specifically, is it?
Oh, that's my standard practice to conduct conservative calculations. I didn't write in here the word conservative.
Well, I appreciate what your standard practice is, but what I'm noting is that in your report, we wouldn't know that, would we, Dr. Nye?
I believe that you would if you look at the numbers and the calculations.
Which are not present in your physical report, are they?
They're not in my dated report.
The study of biomechanics is, for injury biomechanics, is the study of the failure of biological systems. Is that fair?
Yes, biological material.
And biological material in this case would be the body caused by the corn rake penetration, correct?
So tissues, yeah, we talked yesterday. Injury is defined as a failure of biological tissue.
And I believe, as you described yesterday, your opinion here is that the tissues failed by compression due to puncturing or the penetration wounds caused by the corn rake?
Tensile overload.
And tensile overload would be the compression of the skin at odds with the corn rake, fair?
So due to the blunt object, when you compress the skin, it will deform with the object, and then it will, because of tensile loading, and then will start to tear. And that is why the appearance of blunt force injuries, as Dr. Hammers described, have that bruising and tearing rather than a sharp force injury.
Well, regardless of blunt force, sharp force injuries, there's no dispute that that corn rake caused the injuries on Ms. Mullis's back, correct?
Correct.
And that's in alignment with the medical diagnosis, as you noted too, correct?
Yes.
Because you are not able to diagnose the injury itself, fair?
I do not diagnose the injuries, that's correct.
Nor do you diagnose or note the treated injury patterns as it relates to a medical conclusion, correct?
I do not treat injuries, that is correct.
So the pathological diagnosis here was not being made by you, fair?
Right, I don't diagnose and treat, I'm not a medical doctor.
So your conclusion was tensile overload from penetration with a blunt object, correct?
Yes, blunt penetrating force.
Going through this, you conducted no experiments using the clothing or like clothing that was found on Ms. Mullis's body, correct?
What do you mean by experiments?
You at no point evaluated what additional force would be necessary to puncture the specific clothing on Ms. Mullis's body, right?
I did.
You evaluated the specific requirements added on from the 3 layers of clothing specifically related to her in that specific case.
So the types of clothing that she had on.
In a general sense, right?
The materials. I considered the materials those types of clothing would be made of.
So in a general sense, you applied the research as it relates to the layers of clothing.
Well, if you look at the tags of the clothing, they give the material properties, what they're made of. So denim, polyester, cotton. So the tags of the clothing indicated that.
How long is the rake?
37 inches long.
And that's noted in your report that was filed?
I
Well, I'll rephrase, that's not noted in the report as filed, correct?
I don't know. I might be. I'm not sure.
Feel free to take a gander through it and let me know when you've viewed it.
Sure.
Take a gander.
Yeah, I don't think I wrote the 37 inches long in the report.
And did you document the length of the tines in your report?
Would that be the same question if I wrote it in the report?
Did you note in the report the length of the tines specifically?
The length of the tines? No.
Or the gap spaces and angles of the tines at issue?
I did not put the specifics of the rake in the letter here, this letter report.
Because none of the calculations or information is documented in your written report, right?
None of the calculations?
Correct.
So just the conclusions of the calculations.
And your conclusion is that it would be impossible to cause the injuries at the hand of another in this case?
So to a reasonable degree of biomechanical certainty, more likely than not, it is unlikely.
Well, you say that with certainty there, that you, correct, as to conclusion number 1 on page 5, for instance, you decide certainly that no one swung the corn rake into Ms. Mullis's body, right?
Yes, to a reasonable degree of biomechanical certainty.
And I believe yesterday you testified that it was a swinging motion specifically, but then came back today and said you had these other hypotheses, fair?
Objection.
Based on what, Your Honor?
That misstates your testimony, Your Honor.
He's turning into Brooks. Grounds. How much for you to just flip to Cornhub and search for rake videos? As it will be my last thing I ever do on YouTube, substantial amounts. Again, you'll have to take it up with the head of programming, which is Jamie.
Oh, stop giving me more responsibilities. What did I tell you earlier?
But you don't do anything, even though I give you all these nice titles.
Yeah, you give me all these titles. And I feel like I'm responsible for something.
Yeah, but it's not like I hold you up on it.
I
I gave
know.
you your own HR hours, and they were from 4 to 4:01.
I requested those hours. Thank you very much.
Plant fan is having a nice day.
Kelly, can you read me the question?
She's not coming. She's leaving in 1 week. She doesn't have time.
I keep forgetting I have to do that too.
Mr. Duden,
25
just
to
maybe
30
want to
years.
rephrase your question. I'm not
She doesn't like
sure
the young
that
meat.
I even completely understand it and the answer was asked.
God.
Sure. I have down in yesterday that you had said it would be
Please
impossible
don't
to swing the corn rake
round
into a
up
body,
any
correct?
17-year-old
I don't
to bring
say
him to my
impossible.
house.
My standard is unlikely.
Unless
So it
they're
is
gonna maul my,
unlikely that it
like,
was swung into her body.
clear out my
So to a
snow.
reasonable degree of biomechanical certainty, then it would be impossible.
And yesterday you said it's not an overhead swing, right?
Correct.
Or a lateral swing, fair?
Correct, and I said that today too.
And based on my analysis, or at least where my notes cut off, right? Your first mention of kicking, pushing, or otherwise was said today, fair?
I answer the questions that are asked to me. Those questions weren't asked to me yesterday.
Well, it's not noted in your report, is it?
We talked about kicking is not.
But
known
you
in my
needed to
report.
ask
And it
them.
wasn't mentioned specifically yesterday, as you implicitly agree?
I'm here to answer questions. I wasn't asked yesterday.
So that's correct, right? That you were
don't-
not asked specifically about anything other than swinging the rake yesterday.
I believe sorry.
This question has been asked and answered, and the record is the record on this issue.
Overruled, the witness
You
can
didn't
answer
ask
if she's
them.
able.
I believe my testimony was continuing because it was the end of the day, so my testimony wasn't done yesterday.
Yeah, don't
You mentioned
be
that there would be not enough
stupid
force to
about
push
it.
into the body because the literature supports this conclusion. That's what you said today, yes?
Yes, the literature indicates a maximum two-handed push force for males.
And by the literature specifically, you're only referencing that one citation that doesn't reference it outright?
It does reference it. If you,
Well, we wouldn't know, right? You would agree that it wouldn't be noted in your calculations. Again, we've talked about this part already.
well, I listed in my report, it's provided in my report, in my notes.
Permission to work with one of the demonstrative exhibits that were previously used, Your Honor?
Certainly, I don't have access to those though, so.
We'll pull up whatever.
Sure.
Well, I think I don't know if you needed to switch over the cords. That was mostly the.
You have access to them?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great, great. Whoever has the remote might need to turn the TV on for us though.
You have your own, you have your own, right?
Oh, we have a cord.
Yeah, you have your own.
Is that you guys? All right, perfect.
Looking
You
at
have
the
a
screen in front of you,
rock
showing you
solid
what's labeled
case,
as
you'll be able to
demonstrative
convict him
exhibit
again, so
J, I
let it
believe.
happen.
This is the demonstrative you worked with previously with Ms. Thompson, correct?
I developed this.
Mostly my question is, this is just the same image that was used when you were working and speaking with Ms. Thompson, right?
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you. It is.
So you're familiar with this because, as you said, you created it, fair?
Yes.
This is what you stated on, I believe, your direct examination was the likely scenario of the initial impact, or the initial time impact. Is that fair?
Well, it's a two-dimensional, as I said before, so it doesn't show the 3 dimensions.
But I believe, as you stated, this would speak to the trajectories at issue, correct?
Yes, for A, B, C, and D.
And this is, as you stated, would be the first injury. I believe you called them wound patterns. Is that fair? I don't want to misquote you on that one. First set of puncture wounds that occurred during this incident, correct?
So A, B, and C occur first.
So looking at this, this would be the initial impact for the through and through injury, the one that resulted in the puncture that came out this front side of her chest, right?
Again, this is a two-dimensional profile view of a static torso with no head, no arms, no legs. So it can hyperextend, but yes.
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's previously been marked as State's Exhibit D in this case. Here you go, Dr. Nye.
Thank you.
What is this a picture of?
This is a picture of a gel torso.
And are you familiar with this image of a gel torso?
Yes.
You took this picture, correct?
Yes.
And it was during your research and experiments as it related to this case, true?
No, my research and experiments and testing and my opinions had already been formulated when I took this picture.
These were subsequent experiments undertaken for purposes of this case, true?
It was not an experiment. I already had my opinions.
So this is you working with the gel torso, correct?
Yes,
And you recognize it because, is that your hand in the image?
that is correct.
And you took the photograph?
Yes,
And it's a fair and accurate representation of your work with the gel torso as it relates to this case, fair?
yes.
Your Honor, I would move to admit State's Exhibit D.
Letter D,
D, yes.
isn't that in already?
I believe it was not stipulated to its admission previously.
Okay.
D and E remain pending.
Any objection to Exhibit D?
Or in terms of authentication and foundation, no, I think it depends on the purpose for which it's being offered, which I mean, we would reserve a right to argue its relevance, but in terms of, I believe that the state has authenticated it and laid the foundation in the way that, the way that the state has described it.
Okay, D is admitted.
This, permission to publish, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. So this is looking at a copy of State's Exhibit D, which was just admitted. This is the gel torso work that you're doing,
Yes,
and that's for this case specifically.
it was for this case, yes.
And that relates to a female gel torso, is that fair?
A attempted model of a female torso, yes.
And the image shows that it's being impaled by a model corn rake, is that fair?
A purchased coin rake, yes.
And that corn rake was used to be of similar shape or spacing of the tines as it relates to the one at issue in this case?
Yes,
So when the impaled wound trajectory is done on the gel torso here, that's to mirror the initial strike or the initial fall, as you would say, for Ms. Mullis?
yes, it was to try and replicate or demonstrate here wound A.
And was wound A, if you recall, the one that came out the other side of her chest?
Yes,
Your report nor any of your data collection references her range of motion, though, correct?
her range of motion?
Correct.
No,
And it doesn't factor in as more of a dynamic variable, whether or not, I guess, the range of motion of her shoulders or arms. Fair?
it does not talk about what her range of motion is.
In fact, your report doesn't evaluate what would be necessary or how she would be able to remove the corn rake at issue here by reaching behind her. Is that correct?
So you're just grabbing the rake, you're not trying to grab the tines, but I don't,
So in the theory in question here, your posited way that this occurred, Ms. Mullis reached behind her and removed the rake. Is that correct?
she did not remove the entire rake, no.
But she was able to generate enough leverage or force to remove part of the rake. Is that fair?
That's what happens when you grab the rake handle, which is essentially right at her buttocks. So just
To me right now, it seems like he's
What?
that he's totally misstating what she said, because she said the rake would be down her back, and then she reached behind, down by her hips. That's where the blood on the rake came from, and tried to remove it. He's saying, oh, she was reaching behind her, like she's up there in the middle of the back trying to get it out. But she said
Yeah.
she was doing it down by the hip.
Yeah, because he said it was
So-
down by her butt.
Yeah. Hey, dear.
And that's possible. I mean, who knows if she just tried to like grab it, if she fell on it and stuff, you know, she probably wasn't knocked out unconscious right away.
No, leftovers are always good.
reaching, touching, even scratching your hip.
After it had gone through her full chest cavity.
Yes, that's I showed you in that previous diagram.
But you didn't evaluate her range of motion specifically, correct?
Your Honor, I don't know that the witness had finished her answer.
There's a question pending. The witness can answer that. Please, counsel, just let's try to let the witness finish her answer before you ask your next question.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So once as that diagram previously showed you,
No, I have a problem with the double stabbing as well. This is the best witness for me so far to try and show there could have been another explanation.
when the rakes are lined up with the horizontal trajectories, the rake handle essentially is against her body or against her buttocks. So essentially you're just kind of scratching. You can reach back and grab it, it's touching you. And
Something
pulling
like
it
this.
in that manner of the second diagram where you grab the rake or reoriented, that essentially, because the rake is stiff, it creates a leverage to pull out one of the tines. And the tine that it pulls out is not deep, relatively
Yeah, 'cause
speaking.
there was
That's why A and B stay in.
According to the wounds,
Is
a
range of
couple of
motion
them
an
weren't
important
even all the
factor
way
as it relates to
through. They were
biomechanics?
that deep.
It depends. If I'm talking about a gymnast and someone doing, a splits or something, but this is not what we're talking about here.
Is it a relevant human factor as it relates to the evaluation as per the sources you've included in your report?
It wasn't something that was questioned because I don't have information that she's a manual laborer. She was doing manual labor that day. She can reach down and
So you
tie
didn't-
her shoes. So
I apologize. And I understand that, but you didn't evaluate from whether or from what perspective the ability to reach behind her or her range of motion to be able to
But
reach
you
or
don't know
contract,
that
correct?
either.
it did not
So,
seem like a far-fetched ability to be able to reach back and scratch your hip.
yeah,
Despite
Even
it
mine-
being an instance
I
where
can
she was
do
already
that,
dead.
and I'm not very flexible at
Yes,
all.
it's essentially touching her against her.
I trained shoulders today,
Buttocks.
and even I can put them behind my back. And I have zero
Despite
shoulder mobility.
one of the wounds coming through her
I
chest.
mean, you'd have to
So
be
she's
like,
grabbing, yes, she can reach back and grab the
600
handle.
pound life
It's
or
just
something.
right by her body. It's not in some obscure, 10 feet above her head kind of location.
Well, you would agree that there would be some force necessary for her to generate, to be able to pull it out of her body after being impaled through and through, right?
Yes, that leveraging, again, grabbing the handle and pulling it down by her left hip and the handle forward, that creates leverage, which causes time 3 to come out.
But you would agree that there's a calculation or a way to evaluate leverage as it relates to the human body, right?
I don't need that. That's not necessary.
But my question was that there is a way in biomechanics to evaluate that, correct?
Yeah, she
You
doesn't
can
need it.
evaluate torque, sure,
And you did not include any mention of torque as it relates to her ability to rotate, correct?
because it's unnecessary.
And yesterday, though, when you testified, I believe, you mentioned torque and the ability to twist and the inability for,
head.
you disproved whether or not she was able to push the rake out, is that fair? Or I'm sorry, or pushed onto the rake, is that correct?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. You have to clarify for me, please.
You testified yesterday that you considered the hypothesis as to whether someone pushed her onto a rake somehow, and you said you disproved it. Do you recall that?
Yes, if they forcibly pushed her, yes.
And you said because of push on the shoulders, it wouldn't be a possible solution or scenario here because of torque and twisting, and it would flip the rake.
Because of rotational acceleration and horizontal velocity.
But you did not include that scenario as I mentioned in your reports either, correct?
I did not write that in my report.
And so when torque was relevant to disprove a hypothesis, it was a relevant consideration?
I didn't need to calculate it. What do you mean?
How would it flip the rake?
Because the rake is top heavy, and when you have horizontal motion and rotational, when you impact the rake in that position, it's going to cause the rake to flip upward, meaning the handle comes up to the ceiling.
Even when the handle is flush against the ground?
When you impact that rake with that kind of force, that kind of horizontal and rotational motion.
Well, I guess I'm confused here. So she can fall back onto it, right?
Yes,
But she can't be pushed with equal force at the shoulders onto that rake and caused to fall on it.
so again, this is talking about a push, an external load applied to your top of your body. When you fall from standing height, you don't have an additional external force applied to the top of your body.
So here,
Yeah.
let's talk in the hypothetical then. Let's
Even
say
I
equal force
understand
was
that.
applied to both shoulders of the top part of a person's body. Oh, I apologize. Let's say equal force was applied to both shoulders
Just
by an
slow down.
external force, or person, let's say, to the top part of their body, causing them to fall backwards. Would that flip the rate?
So this is an aggressive push that would generate a horizontal and rotational acceleration.
But merely falling back on it in the presence of an object, causing it, say, an auger, wouldn't cause that imbalance?
No, again, this is not a external force applied to the body above the center of mass, forcing it to horizontally travel and rotate.
And those calculations, again, aren't in your report or in your notes, all right?
They're unnecessary. I don't need to calculate that.
Well, there is nothing documented noting you considered that from a perspective of a hypothesis to rule it out if you were just reading your report and notes, correct?
That is correct.
So going to, again, demonstrative J, this is something you created, correct?
Yes,
And this would be the likely wound scenario of A, B, and C, per your testimony, in 2D format, right?
ND,
In D, in the two-dimensional format, right?
in the two-dimensional format, that is correct.
But, so this is your probable statement as to what occurred here.
This is what happened. She fell on the rake.
If I rotate this image 180 degrees,
Sure.
does this not supposedly generate the same injuries in question?
Yes.
It does?
Well, you have to look at force, but that is the mechanism.
Strength is a component of force evaluations in biomechanics, correct? One's strength when acting upon an object, for instance.
Yes.
Did you test or have any outside information about Mr. Mullis' strength patterns?
But that doesn't make sense because one thing is this is the rake on the floor. This is the person going backwards. That makes this is the force generated because this is what's force? Force is it weight times acceleration or something like that? I believe, yeah. Am I wrong? I haven't had physics in a lot of years, but I believe
Oh,
force is weight times acceleration, or mass versus mass times acceleration. This, I don't know. Let's say she's 120. She's 120 pounds.
okay.
Traveling at X speed. That makes the impact at the rake. What he's saying is, if she's standing here, with implants, they are a little low, and he's standing behind her. And swinging the rake, then mass. Oh, wait. I think it's mass. Let's call it mass.
Just put it in there.
Yeah, force is mass
Force.
plus acceleration.
Yeah.
So you're here you have the mass of the body plus the acceleration, but over here you have the force of the rake plus acceleration. So acceleration would have to be that much higher to outstrip the mass to insert it as deeply, because this is a flat surface, and when she hits that, there's no give to it. But he
Yeah.
would have to swing it much faster, because he has to make up for the lack of mass, and her body would move forward.
Yeah, because there's no, if she's hitting the floor directly, like you said, with the rake, that's, I mean, there's no give. And then
Yeah.
when you're swinging it at somebody, they're moving. And so it's going to be a lot, more difficult. And probably with the angles of the wounds too. I mean, she considered that.
Those are the boobs. They're a little low. She's an older lady. She's 40. It happens. Yeah, because again, falling on something that's on a hard surface, there's an instant transfer of mass on the point, because there's no give in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So that all of the impact would be here. But if you're swinging it, first of all, you'll have to swing it that much faster, and she would have to kind of brace against it to get the same impact, and his arm can't give.
Well, and I feel like, weren't they saying that he like also booted it into her too? And that's what she was talking about, like, or pushed it into her.
Yeah, he
Talking
either
about how
pushed it
the
into
torque
it or
of the body would be different in that scenario versus, because if you're pushing somebody, you're pushing like up on their body, it's going to move their body differently. Then they just fall flat onto the floor surface with that object.
But I think that what the other one was testifying was, if she was hit by the rake, fell on her front, and had the rake, and then he stomped on it, that could leave that could force it into her that way. I think that's what the other Emmy was talking about, that she was on the front, and then he stamped on it to force it into her back. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm just asking questions.
No, it's
What is
good
ability?
because it
No,
just
that's why I
brings
use the
reasonable
maximum
doubt.
forces available, so such as a push. And
Yeah, he looks like a strong guy. He's a farmer. We know farmers have a farmer strength. The only problem I would have, we need to know the weight, because we know it's 37 feet, 37, what did she say? 37 inches long.
37 inches long is the rate. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could, if you knew the speed of, no, if you know the weight of the rake, especially because it's top loaded, you could figure out how much force it could generate. Again, with a generic man, probably figure that one out.
literature.
And again,
She claims he couldn't have done that, because then she would be twisting in a different way. But I don't know. I'm speculating.
Yeah, she said the
Despite it
torque
not
of
being
the body.
documented
I
there,
like the
taking you
word.
at your word for that, what is his maximum strength ability?
So again, it's in literature, the maximum, the very maximum reported force for a two-handed push for males is reported in literature.
What is that?
Yeah, that's another thing because you have a small space, 3 to 3.5 feet across. But I don't know how tall the ceiling was because was there enough room that he can generate force from his arm? Did he have it in here? All of that. Maybe that's why he wants the
It's
measurements.
138 pounds.
How many pounds of pressure or force are required to be exerted to puncture the skin?
For one time? Is that your question?
Sure.
So one time for skin on the back is approximately close to 75 pounds.
So one time in this instance, Mr. Mullis would have the force capabilities to be able to puncture the skin with one time.
With a push, but we know that the rake can't be entered one by one to cause this injury pattern.
What's required for 4?
Well, it's 3 that goes in,
What's required for 3 then?
and you consider the clothing. If you consider the clothing, then we're up near between 300 to 340-ish, depending on the conservativeness.
And again, what was his strength pattern or ability that you say you considered at a maximum scenario?
138 pounds for a two-handed push.
And does that evaluate any sort of measures?
And that's just a cop to figure out how tall the chemical barrels that she allegedly was on standing up or getting that dog crate off of.
Like, I believe something more dynamic like acceleration.
Yes, that's what we talked about. That is an accelerated push.
I'm sorry, an accelerated fall combined with it too.
So the fall actually, what do you mean an accelerated fall? So talking about a push, if you're pushing someone over, this is an acceleration, not just a static push. So we talked about having the rake against someone's body and you're statically pushing it at a constant pressure, or you're applying acceleration. So when you apply acceleration, it's a more severe scenario. So that scenario has a maximum two-handed force of 138 pounds.
And what would be required if constant pressure was applied?
Less than that.
So less force would be required.
Less force would be required to puncture, that would be generated. Less force would be generated when you apply a constant push.
So it's your testimony that if Ms. Mullis was, say, face down on the ground, for instance, and someone pushed the corn rake into her back, that's not possible?
You would not penetrate the clothing and the skin, no.
And you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of certainty?
Absolutely.
You also, though, didn't factor in her other wound patterns, correct? I believe yesterday you said you were only retained to consider the penetration wounds specifically, right?
I was asked to focus on them because there are explanations for the other wounds.
Well, you provided no explanation in your report for anything else, right?
Right, I was asked to focus on the penetration wounds.
So you
He's
didn't
doing
consider
his
from the
job
perspective
like
of the
everyone
wounds
else.
on Ms. Mullis's knees, hands, or chin.
Right, so actually they fit my scenario. So going up on her knees, trying to extract the rake, being on a concrete gravel type ground as in the shed is available, that would generate the mechanism to cause those injuries.
Just pushing onto her hands and knees.
Well, crawling, she's crawling.
And the strike on her chin, how was that caused?
So again, that was from Dr. Hammers and to discuss.
And I believe, though, the standards for biomedical or biomechanical evaluations say that you're supposed to accept the treating physician's diagnosis?
That I do not, I don't diagnose and treat, therefore I don't dispute diagnosis.
I apologize. In your report, I believe it's noted specifically that you're supposed to look to the treating physician or treating provider's diagnosis. Is that fair?
That's usually where the wound pattern is, but autopsy, you're not treating anybody because they're gone. It's the medical professionals that I'm looking for that provide a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Just to quick summarize your evaluation and opinions here as it relates to this instance
Not the
specifically.
end
Your
all be all.
calculations are not noted in your reports.
The conclusions of my calculations are in my report.
I'm asking about the facts and data that would lead you to those conclusions are not specifically enumerated in your report. Fair?
So the calculations, the foundation for them are included, and the conclusions are included.
You took no measurements specifically of the location or space.
Because it had changed, and I had a diagram from the police department right after the incident.
And you did not document specifically, you're assuming that the rake where it was discovered by law enforcement or noted by law enforcement was in fact where the rake was to begin?
No, I did not assume that. I had no other information to indicate that the incident happened anywhere else other than the shed.
Could be a top, a t-shirt, and a Carhartt. I don't know if you would say Carhartt is a coat.
Despite
Yeah,
knowing
or
that
a
the
thick coat,
rake had been pulled
actually.
out by Mr. Mullis, right?
Can't you get Carhartt
Because that was what's
hoodies
available in the
and
information,
pants,
that the incident
Jamie?
happened in the shed.
Yeah,
But if it didn't,
But
it
that
wouldn't
she
change
was
my opinions.
wearing one of those thick,
The
like,
location
work
inside the
coats.
red shed where the incident occurred and the physical limitations of the space wouldn't change your opinions?
If they happened elsewhere outside the sheds, that would not change my opinions. I'm not exactly, maybe I'm confused at what you're asking. It seems like you're questioning whether the incident happened in the shed, and I'm just a little confused by that question.
If the incident did not occur in the shed, would your opinion change?
No,
And if the location of where the incident occurred wasn't near the pet carrier, for instance, would your opinion change?
no, because this, again, based on the physical evidence of the injuries and the rake, everything else is supportive.
So no environmental condition would change the opinion of your statements here?
I'm saying that I considered the spacing, but even in that limited spacing where I know that a lateral swing can't happen, I still analyzed it. And I analyzed an overhead, and I analyzed different positions. And all those positions can happen in a location other than the shed. So I considered alternative locations as well. But what comes down to it is the physical evidence and including the rake and the injuries themselves.
With the assumptions that you knew where it occurred in the shed, or no?
There's no assumptions here.
Yesterday, I just want to confirm, your testimony was that you
There's
can't
no
analyze
assumptions.
every
That's a good
scenario
answer.
or every incident in a case. Is that correct?
That would not be reasonable to do. Again, like I said yesterday, there was no information that there was a trapeze available. If there's something that gives me more information, I'm happy to analyze that scenario. It's my job as a neutral party to consider, analyze, and evaluate new evidence.
And the last thing I want to talk about, I understand the statement was that you're salaried by Robson Forensic, true?
True.
But you've been compensated by Mr. Mullis' team or the fund for which is providing for him?
No.
You've received no compensation?
My salary stays the same whether I'm here or not.
Well, I will re-clarify. How much has Robson Forensic been compensated to provide for your testimony and your ability to be here?
I have no idea.
What's your hourly billable rate?
I think it started I believe Robson billed me out initially at $640.
And that's $640 an hour?
That is correct.
And based upon an estimate even, how
Just going back to yesterday's Karen Reed hearing, where $5,750 a day per expert was a horrendous big amount that they clearly was lying about. This lady gets $640 an hour. If she does 10 hours of work, let's say from she leaves her house, testimony goes back home, that's easy, 8 to 10 hours a day. That's all the money that that Brennan yesterday tried to imply with dirty money.
How much has Robson Forensic been paid for your testimony here today? How many hours of work have you conducted?
I have no idea.
You have no rough approximation of how much work you've done in this case?
I
Oh my
do
God.
not have an idea of the number of hours or the amount. I have a lot of cases, and those are not things I keep track of. That's something accounting keeps track of.
Well, my understanding is that you bill your time and enter that time to be billed, correct?
Yes, if you would like Robson, you can ask Robson for that information. That's completely fine. I just don't have it on memory right now.
And you don't have any approximation of the hours?
I mean, it's definitely more than 10. I mean, but I don't have I didn't count.
Is it $640 an hour to have you be present in travel for trial, for instance?
They bill me hourly, flat rate, yes.
So you being here present for trial over the course here, I believe we had previously discussed that you'd been here since Sunday, is that right?
I arrived Sunday night.
Since arriving on Sunday night, have you been, do they bill for every hour you've been present, or how does that work?
No, I bill for time that I.
This is such a disingenuous, creepy line of questioning.
I really hate
They
it.
should turn it around and say, how much have the state paid you to ask these questions? Because he's getting paid the same as she is. She is on, she's doing her job. They hired a firm to look at this. They used this lady. She came to a conclusion that they wanted her to testify about in court, and she gets paid to do it. I'm pretty sure the guy that checked out Jamie didn't go to Walmart. The guy who checked out Brandon's Goldslager today, he wasn't doing it for free either.
Hmm.
Yes, I have a good authority. Brandon only drinks Goldslager.
That's like a high school girl drink.
Yeah, that's actually why he does it. He says, it reminds me of when I was a high school girl.
I remember it was
In
so cool
trial.
to have that.
So for the rough 7 hours or 8 hours a day, you've been billed at $640 an hour by Robson?
So they bill me hourly, and I bill for the
I love that Jess just made a times 10 mathing. That shows she's a lawyer, because the rest of us can time by 10 in our head. You just add a 0.
Also, in these cases, I would just be like, yeah, I made that much. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm good at my job. Like, I don't know. I'd just be a little.
Yeah, and all the girls at Pleasure Palace is gonna love the money Daddy made.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it rain later.
time that I spend here, yes.
Sorry, Jemima. I was just making a lawyer joke. He's probably sitting there thinking,
Taking you
oh
back
my
to the
God,
investigation here, I
640?
believe you're present for Dr. Cruz's testimony, correct?
For the trial testimony, this trial testimony, yes.
And do you recall the noted absence of additional bruising or any sort of identified wound or mark as it related to the handle of the rake against Ms. Mullis's back?
You mean on her buttocks?
Her back, lower spinal column, lumbar spinal area, abdomen, etc.
Abdomen, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the backside of her oblique.
So
Her
her
buttocks as well, yes.
buttocks land on the handle. That
What was that? I'm sorry. I
her
didn't...
buttocks land on the handle, which prevents it from flipping.
Was there any mark noted during the autopsy, to your recollection or knowledge, to her buttock or back of her leg?
I would not expect that there would be a buttock mark, a bruise on her buttocks from landing on the handle.
Do you recall of any noted abrasion or other marking on her lower back?
No.
Would you expect, like you had testified earlier as it related to abrasions around the wound patterns, for instance, there to be any marking or indication of laying or falling on the handle of the rake?
So her buttocks that contact the rake, and I would not expect an injury there.
In this scenario, though, her buttocks would have hit the concrete as well, correct?
Right, a distributed load, so the handle and the concrete.
And her arm, I believe, as you mentioned, which the location of where her arm would fall would potentially show some sort of injury to her elbow or the back of her arm. Is that fair?
Objection, Your Honor. I mean, I think the state has said this witness can't provide, medical diagnoses. I think that's what they're asking her to provide.
Sustained.
I don't have anything further.
Any redirect?
I do have some redirect, Your Honor. Dr. Knight, you were asked whether you testified in a criminal case before. Is there a different set of engineering principles that you apply to an insurance matter versus a criminal matter?
No.
Are engineering principles the same regardless of the type of client who's asked you to look at a particular situation?
Nope, they're all the same.
You've talked a little bit about the investigation that you yourself conducted to perform a site visit of the shed in this case.
Yeah, I did a site visit of the farm.
Of the farm. When did you go to the farm?
I don't remember.
Would you rely on any information in your report about when it was that you conducted a site visit? And let me ask you a better question. Would looking at your report refresh your memory about when you conducted a site visit?
Let me take a look.
Let me direct you. We'll see who gets there first.
Oh, September 18th, 2023.
Does that sound right?
Oh, that's the clothing.
Yeah, okay.
Jamie, did you watch Gossip Girl?
Like the show Gossip Girl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle Trachtenberg from the show has just passed away.
I know. I watched Buffy too, and she was on Buffy.
I don't know who she is.
She's always been like a side character, always like a mean girl.
June 30th and July.
So she's one of your heroes.
She is my idol.
Apparently, she had a liver transplant not that long ago and then passed away.
I don't.
They claim it's natural causes, but it's Hollywood. A lot of natural causes stems from Colombia.
Yeah, she was only 38 or 39.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
July 1st, 2023. That's
You
in my
probably know who she is if you looked her up.
And when is it that you
People don't
looked
know
at
who she
the
is.
clothing in the rake in
You'll
this
be like,
case?
oh yeah, that girl.
September 18th, 2023.
And is that when you took photographs of those objects as well?
I never watched the movie.
Yes.
Jamie.
You were asked a number of questions about information that's in your, and I'm gonna have while I'm asking this question, I'm gonna have our colleague plug back in our computer here. You were asked some questions about information that's provided in your notes versus in your report, and without publishing this document, so I'm gonna ask my colleague to turn the television off for a second, just so we have a clear record of what the document we've been talking about. I'm gonna show you what we've marked as Exhibit 976. And I know there are some that we've addressed in questions, Your Honor, about the admissibility. I just want to establish with the witness that the document that applicant has marked as 976, just what that document is. So without publishing this document, I'm just going to ask you.
Didn't watch the movie. I know most of Europe, so I didn't need to see it.
And right now, just the witness and myself can see it. It won't be displayed on the big TVs.
Correct, Your Honor. That's what I'm seeking to do.
I see it.
All right. I'm going
First
to
page.
have my colleague just scroll through what's on the monitor in front of you. And the question I'm going to ask you is if the document that appears in front of you that's been marked as Exhibit 976 is a complete copy of your additional notes that you provided related to your work in this case.
It appears to be, yes.
All right. And if you need to count these pages, you can, but if I represented to you that that's a 14-page document, does that sound correct to you?
Yes.
Between your report and Exhibit 976, do those, and I guess your two reports, so between your two reports, let me start this question again. You have photographs that you have provided in this case reflecting your inspection of the clothing and the rake, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you take photographs that included a measuring, a ruler in them to measure, that demonstrated your measurements of the tines and the length of the rake and the tines of the rake?
Yes.
So you have photographs that show those measurements, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and you took photographs that documented your understanding of her clothing, is that right?
Yes.
You provided photographs, you provided those photographs as well as the notes that we've been describing that are Exhibit 976, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you have your two reports.
Yes.
And that is all information that you made available to counsel to provide to the state, reflecting your opinions and the bases of your understanding of the information in this case?
Yes.
I don't like this lawyer's way of asking questions.
Just briefly, since 976 is still in front of you, I'm going to have my
It's the
colleague
bench trial.
direct you to the last page of that document, which is page 14.
I'm here.
All right. You have a references section on the last page of 976?
Yes.
And I think you were asked some questions about reference 5. Is that a complete citation for the reference material that you're alluding to in reference 5?
Well, I didn't allude to it. I stated it. But all my references are complete, even with page numbers.
I appreciate that clarification. If I was going to go to a journals database, a medical journals database, using the information you've given for reference 5, I could pull up that article.
Objection, Leading.
I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Okay.
Using the information that you've provided for reference 5, could you pull that cited reference up in a medical journals database?
You could, but you can just go to Google. If you just type in Nolan and then forces generated, it would pop up. It's widely available to the public.
Is that true for the other references that you've identified on page 14?
That's why I provide complete citations so someone can go get them. Anybody can get them.
You were asked some questions about,
I didn't like her yesterday. I actually don't think she was asking questions yesterday. The day before that, I thought that she was very aggressive. I liked the laughing lady this morning more. I think this lady asked questions way too long and way too convoluted, and she circles and circles and circles.
torque calculations, about the torque,
Ralphie
about the
is,
consideration of torque in pulling out tine
stay
C
away
while
from
pulling a
Ralphie.
tine out of wound C while tines of this rake remained in A and B. Do you remember those questions?
Yes.
Why is it that you did not need to do a calculation for torque in making that determination?
Because we know what came out. That has to be out to be able to make wound E and F. So that third tine 3, has to come out to be able to make wound E. I didn't need to question whether or not it was out.
That's maybe.
You were also asked some questions about why you did not conduct experiments on Ms. Mullis's clothing. Why did you not conduct any experiments on her clothing?
So when you say experiments, that's a little confusing to me because I think for people not in my field, when you think testing or experiments, it has to be physical, like you're breaking something or, doing something. But looking at the holes, considering them, looking at the location, comparing them to the wound location, that's all part of the investigation process, which is essentially a whole big experiment.
Under your definition of an experiment that you just provided, did you give consideration to the properties of Ms. Mullis's clothing in reaching your opinions here?
Yes, absolutely.
You were asked some questions about the shed at issue in this case, and I want to show you a photograph that we looked at that has been admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
Yeah, but I still feel she's asking in a weird way, and she seems aggressive even to her own witness. We have a prosecutor like that in my court, and I really dislike it. She's there to. This is the best witness she can probably get of all the witnesses. She should be helping her, not confusing her.
Elena, you can. While my colleague's doing that, because I want to keep us moving, let me ask you about another issue, and we'll come back to that when it's ready. You were asked some questions about the medical diagnoses in this case, and just some general questions about Dr. Cruz. So I want to direct your attention back to those questions. Did you rely on the information that was provided by Dr. Cruz as to Ms. Mullis's injuries in this case?
Did I rely on Dr. Cruz for the injury pattern?
Yes.
Yes.
Were you in giving your opinions, were you disagreeing in some way with what Dr. Cruz said about that issue?
That is not my role. I don't disagree with medical diagnoses.
You were asked some questions on that issue specifically about the chin injury that there was some testimony about with both Dr. Cruz and Dr. Hammers. Were you present here for their testimony about that issue?
Yes.
Did you hear some testimony from Dr. Cruz that the injury to Ms. Mullis's chin could have been caused from fall?
Farming is the most dangerous profession, I think, in most countries.
I've actually heard a lot of people, like especially these rakes like this that are pronged. It happened back in the day a lot, apparently. But you'd have to Google it and research. Google how many people die from corn rakes.
Doesn't really show. Might have to ask. Oh, it's because rake in Danish is riu. That's spelled kind of like river. So I think that's why it's effed up.
Falling and striking an object?
Yes, I heard Dr. Cruz say that, yes.
Is that testimony in some way inconsistent with your opinions in this case?
I mean, it's not consistent or inconsistent.
Are you here to offer opinions one way or another about Ms. Mullis's chin injury?
No.
And has any of the testimony that you've heard about that chin injury as between Dr. Cruz or Dr. Hammers, does any of that contradict your opinions in this case in some way?
No, not at all. Yeah, when I talk about injuries, it's about mechanism. I don't diagnose.
I think we have this photograph up that I asked you about a second ago, and just for the record, what exhibit number is this? 311. All right, so I'm showing the witness what's been marked as 311. The photograph that you're looking at, this exhibit 311, is that a photograph that you took, Dr. Nye?
I don't think so.
All right, and do you recognize what's depicted in photograph 311?
What's depicted is the dog or pet carrier that it was claimed that Ms. Mullis was going to retrieve in the shed at the time of the incident.
Is there anything about the way that the shed appears in Exhibit 311 that contradicts any of the opinions that you've provided in this case?
No, absolutely not.
Did you rely on, I think you can take this exhibit down now, did you rely on
I don't know how many rakes was involved, but 46,653 people died from falls in 2022.
the photographs and descriptions of the shed as it appeared at the time of the
865 workers died on workplaces.
investigation into Ms. Mullis's
How many
death
farming accidents are there?
in reaching your opinions?
They were supportive of my opinions.
I mean, you were not assuming that the shed appeared the way it looked when you visited the site.
No, I don't. I don't make assumptions, and no, I did not do that.
You've been asked a number of questions about your calculations, and a couple additional questions I have on that topic in particular. Could another expert perform the kinds of calculations?
Globally, at least 170,000 agricultural workers are fatally injured every year. In America, it's 60 to 70 per 100,000 farmers.
That you performed here in reaching your opinions?
Objection, relevance, and speculation.
Maybe, yeah.
This goes to whether her methods are repeatable in her field, Your Honor. That's maybe an artfully posed question, but that's the issue I'm going into briefly.
With that clarification and narrowing of the question,
Last year, 27 people were killed as a result of farming and other agricultural... No, that's in Britain. Sorry.
the witness may answer.
Sorry, could you read that back? Thank you.
You've been asked a number of questions about your calculations, and a couple additional questions I have on that topic in particular. Could another expert perform the kind of calculations that you performed here in reaching your opinions?
Yes, absolutely, and they did.
Are these methods are the methods by which you performed your analysis and performed these calculations, are they accepted in your field?
Absolutely, yes.
And specifically as to your discussion about clothing, the concepts that you relied on here of the tear force of clothing and the tactical strength of clothing are the methods by which you considered those issues generally accepted in the field of biomechanical engineering?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you were asked some
Agriculture has the highest fatality rate by 21.5 fatalities by 100,000 workers.
questions about this gel torso, and the photograph's not
I
out, but do
believe
you
it.
recall the photograph that you were showed by the state as to that issue?
Yes.
First of all, does anything about that photograph contradict your opinions that you've testified about here today in any way?
No, not at all.
And I just want to note for the record, it looks to me that you are looking at a copy of that exhibit, so if you're relying on it to answer the questions, I just want to make sure the record's clear since you have it there. The particular gel torso that's depicted in the state's exhibit, why is there a reason that you did not use that gel torso to illustrate your testimony today?
Objection, Your Honor, based upon our prior motion practice and history. We're happy to approach the bench if that's easier, but certainly the question calls for something that has been the subject.
But less than 10% of fatalities in agriculture was women.
Of much litigation and motion practice previously.
Well, obviously, I'm assuming, of why the gel torso isn't here. I don't know that. I guess, Ms. Thompson, what kind of record do you want on this?
I'm not
Again,
sure I can
this is a
search
bench
that.
trial, not a jury trial. I'm aware of what the procedure.
If you got an ad on my channel, let me know, because then YouTube owes me money.
History is. Do you want some additional record at this point, or?
I do, and I'm happy to do this in front of the witness because I think this can be brief, but honestly, it was confusing to us to have it marked as an exhibit because it was our understanding that the issues here are what they are, and to the extent that I'm not trying to lead the witness, but you've asked me, so the court's asked me, so I'm going to answer. I mean, I think there's been a suggestion in the questions that somehow this object contradicts the opinions that the expert has provided here, that Dr. Nice provided. And so I think some explanation to clarify that issue is necessary for us to make our record. I think the history of this object is well documented, and it's not our intention to dispute, obviously, the pleadings that have been made, but I think there is additional information that goes to the issue that...
Jamie, what's she saying? Can you translate?
About what?
I just don't get her argument. She wants to be leading her expert, asking her expert question because there's something in the questions that goes against her expert's testimony, and she needs to put it on the record. I'm having a hard time figuring out what she's saying.
We didn't raise it, the state raised.
I wasn't really listening all that hard.
No,
so-
you never listen.
Go ahead.
I am listening, but
We can read back the specific question if we'd like to, but my understanding was the question was, why didn't you use this specific gel torso? Or what was the specific question may be important here, but the reason this specific gel torso wasn't used in the litigation after this portion has been held out to be not a scientific issue at all. As the court knows from our prior litigation, that's certainly been disputed.
Well, Ms. Thompson, if it is
It's the
helpful
glasses.
to you, for me to tell you at this point that I didn't find anything with regard to Exhibit D to contradict the earlier
That's why I don't like her. The laughing one this morning was better at just keeping it straight.
testimony of this witness.
his little snarky face.
I
when
think
he
we
said
can just
that.
move past that.
The gel torso was an exhibit this lady used, but she implied that some of the questions about the gel torso was wrong. But I don't think the judge. Again, remember this is a bench trial. The judge is not an idiot. Not every judge is a bev.
terms of where we're at.
I appreciate the court making that a record, and I think for us, obviously, we want to represent our client zealously. We want to make sure we've made our record. Obviously, if that's I think the court has given us some direction in terms of how it is viewing this evidence, and with that understanding, I agree that we can move on.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at my notes at the questions that were asked with regard to Exhibit D. That's where the questions about evaluation of range of motion, things of that nature were asked. I mean, I guess certainly if you want to ask some follow-up questions about that topic, that's fine. But specifically with regard to the use of the gel torso, I don't think there is any need or reason to follow up on that. That particular topic is not going to be useful to the court in making any finding of fact.
I understand, Your Honor, and obviously, again, we want to make sure that we're representing our client in the way that he deserves to be represented. I have two other questions about gel torsos more broadly, not this particular gel torso, that I'd like to ask. And I don't intend to disregard what the court just said. Again, I want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for our client, Your Honor, but obviously there may be an objection to this question, but I don't believe it's covered by what the court just told me.
Go ahead.
From an engineering perspective, in terms of the force calculations that you've been testifying about here today, Dr. Nye, does a gel torso accurately represent the human body?
As far as force is concerned, no.
Correct. As far as force is concerned?
No.
One moment, Your Honor. Just one moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
Sorry, magnitude of force. Let me clarify.
Well, and just to follow up, because I appreciate that question. When you're talking about magnitude of force, are you talking about the forces that would be required, the amount of force, the magnitude of force that would be required as to the issue we've been talking about, the ability of a corn rake to enter the human body?
Right, I would not use that for magnitude.
Hey, you had all the coffee. You can't fall asleep now. Come on.
You were asked a number of questions by the state on cross-examination. Do any of the questions that you've been asked by the state here today change the opinions that you've offered about the hypothesis that Ms. Mullis's injuries were caused by her falling on this rake?
No, if I had no other hypothesis, and that was the only one I tested, everything fits that hypothesis. It is proven.
All right, no other questions, Your Honor.
Mary Cross.
Just briefly, Your Honor, if I may. Drawing your attention to what is reference number 5 for the article, you stated just on redirect that you could pull up the case of Nolan, Hainsworth, and Ruddy forces generated in stabbing attacks just by Googling it, right? Well, I will tell you that we did Google it in permission to place it on the screen, Your Honor, to work with. Is this the article you referenced specifically for the notes and proposition that you evaluated kick and force injuries that were not related to falling or swinging?
Sorry, I've lost my page. This is, so if you scroll down, let me just see here. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going, yep. So hang on 1 second. Yes,
This is the same article.
yes,
Drawing your attention to what is Table 2.
yes,
Do you see Table 2 in front of you?
I do.
In the actions evaluated included a button push, push, slap, and punch, correct?
Correct.
Did not include a kicking or kneeing or any sort of exertional force by what we've talked about here previously, right?
Right, and I didn't evaluate kicking for magnitude, as I discussed.
So this article does not support your proposition that it wasn't kicked or otherwise forced into her body in some other manner, for instance.
Objection, Your Honor. That's, the question is vague as to kicking or other force. I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Would you like to clarify, Mr. Duden?
Along with kicking or forcing into Ms. Mullis's body, the other proffered aspects of your hypotheses testified to today, those are not evaluated according to this article, correct?
So this article was for the two-handed push. The kicking, as you recall, I talked about mechanism of injury, so it wasn't a magnitude discussion.
This article doesn't cover the stomping either, though, does it?
No, I wouldn't, but it's not related to the position, specific position that Ms. Mullis was in at the time of the incident, so it wouldn't list that.
In scrolling down to, well, I think if we did a control find on this, do you believe this article references clothing specifically?
Can you go up?
Oh,
Copy of that exhibit. So I just, if you're relying on it to answer the questions, I just about the ability of a corn rake to enter the human body.
Right.
For the article, you stated just on redirect that you could pull up the case of Nolan, Hainsworth, and Ruddy forces generated in stabbing attacks just by Googling it, right?
So hang on 1 second.
Same article.
Yes,
Drawing your attention to what is Table 2.
yes,
Do you see Table 2 in front of you?
I do.
In the actions evaluated,
we have only been going for 5.5 hours today, Brendan. And tomorrow we will have a cut at midday, so you don't have to drink 3 bottles of Goldschlager tomorrow.
included a button push, push, slap, and punch, correct?
Correct.
Did not include a kicking or kneeing or any sort of exertional force by what we've talked about here previously, right?
Right, and I didn't evaluate kicking for magnitude, as I discussed.
So this article does not support your proposition that it wasn't kicked or otherwise forced into her body in some other manner, for instance.
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't see how kicking could really,
That's, the question is vague as to kicking or other force. I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Would you like to clarify, Mr. Duden?
You could kick her and she can fall over.
well, is she up against, no, and he said he didn't like, they were, because they had been talking about like kicking it into her, like,
Yeah, I would say stomping, but he could say that's a kick.
yeah. Well, he references stomping specifically. That's why I said kick. What are we kicking though? Is she up against a wall when you're doing it? I don't know. Anyways, she knows better than I do, this lady. What am I trying to?
I bet you can find some Goldschlager. Jamie has a few bottles lying around.
No, I haven't had that stuff in years.
I never had it.
Along with kicking or forcing into Ms. Mullis's body, the other
The ME said something about potentially kicking, but I can't remember what it was. Sorry.
proffered aspects of your hypotheses testified to today, those are not evaluated according to this article, correct?
So this article was for the two-handed push. The kicking, as you recall, I talked about mechanism of injury, so it wasn't a magnitude discussion.
This article doesn't cover the stomping either, though, does it?
No, I wouldn't, but it's not related to the position, specific position that Ms. Mullis was in at the time of the incident, so it wouldn't list that.
In scrolling down to, well, I think if we did a controlled find on this, do you believe this article references clothing specifically?
Can you go up?
Sure.
This one, so I can point to the clothing ones if you want.
But it's not this article?
Can you move up a little bit? Let me just review before I speak to it. Can you start at the beginning? I'm sorry. And then, thank you. And then scroll slowly. I'm sorry, I can't do it myself. Okay. Yes, keep going. Thank you so much. Yep, keep going. Keep going. Thank you.
God, how annoying.
Trauma, stabbing, keep going. Keep going.
If there's a high school,
going.
college nearby, they should have it.
Keep going. And keep going. Perfect, yes, I confirm that this was not one of the ones. I just wanted to make sure it's not the clothing ones, but I have clothing ones listed.
And then based upon your testimony here today, is it your testimony that you were able to differentiate the degrees of force at issue here by looking at the wounds and their depths or the aspects of the wound injuries sustained by Ms. Mullis?
So location of wound, knowing it's on her back, and understanding that it's a tensile overload.
So it was just merely looking at the wounds and the depths and information provided to you on that front?
So again, clarifying your question as I understand it, the magnitudes are considering the location, the diagnosis of the wounds, as well as the instrument being a blunt object.
And that's based upon the appearance and photographs and the information provided to you by Dr. Cruz and ultimately Dr. Hammers as well?
Yes.
Looking to the discussion section of the same article here, and beginning with the paragraph of, thus based on both of the results of both experiments. So beginning with this paragraph, thus based on the results of both experiments, in the case of a wound tract involving skin and organs only, applying a subjective scale of mild to moderate to severe force in an attempt to suggest to the court that one could differentiate the degrees of force by simply looking at the resulting wound is inappropriate. All that can be said is that minimal force required for a particular implement to breach the skin and cause injury to the skin and soft tissue only has been met. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So here, the conclusion by going off of the appearance of the wounds themselves, we can't really say more than the minimal amount of force that would be required to penetrate it, correct? Based upon this article's guidance.
Which is what I use. That's why I use a conservative value. So I use the minimum force. And then I use the blunt instrument cross-sectional area. That's exactly what I did.
I don't have anything else, Your Honor.
One question.
Go ahead.
If at any point in any of your work in this case, Dr. Knight, have you have you relied on the idea that you, in your evaluation, can differentiate degrees of force simply by looking at a resulting wound?
I'm sorry.
Sure, I'm going to ask that question in a better
lot of
way.
words.
Does your analysis differentiate degrees of force by looking at the wounds that Ms. Mullis had?
That wasn't what I was doing. That paper talks about measuring force if you, depending on how severe the attack is. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at forces necessary to penetrate.
You didn't reach conclusions about the force that was at issue, that could be at issue in these hypotheses just by looking at the wounds that Ms. Mullis had. Is that right?
Again, I rely on the diagnoses. So looking at the minimum force and the maximum, say, push, then I'm meeting both ends. So if I take the maximum and I take the minimum and it still doesn't meet, then anything after that is met, essentially.
Were your conclusions on that issue based on your full investigation and analysis, and not just looking at Ms. Mullis's injuries?
Oh, it's a complete, yes, the engineering investigation takes a lot of time and consideration and the scientific method that we talked about.
All right, no other questions, Your Honor.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Nye. Counsel, do you need to address Exhibit 976 before the witness is gone, or is that something she can be released for?
Your Honor, we sought to admit Dr. Nye's reports, and I think there was an objection to that, and I think this issue relates to, the issue about these notes relates to that concept. I think we're seeking to admit it based on this testimony in that respect, but I don't think we need further information from the witness, and we can take that issue up at the appropriate time.
Okay. 285, I think, was the other exhibit.
I believe that's right, Your Honor.
Yeah, okay. All right, so normally I would say this would be a good spot for our afternoon break. Do we have another witness today?
We do, Your Honor.
All right, let's go ahead and take about 15 minutes at this point. We'll plan on.
Oh, I had a poll, Jamie. Let me, for once, remember to end my poll while the stream is still running.
Did you make a poll? Oh,
Did you watch the trial the first time? 81% says no. So
oh wow.
we could potentially conclude everyone who thinks that he's innocent right now is because it's on a very basis, very limited part of the testimony.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, after this whole testimony, seeing that we saw the doctor and then we saw this lady, I mean, for me, there's questions.
Yeah, there could be some reasonable doubt with this lady. I would say that, yes.
Yeah.
It was at 48, is it called 48 hours episode? Oh,
Yeah, it was
I'm
like
so
something like
effing
that.
tired.
Mhm. There's been a couple like 48-hour things on this case.
It's 10 past 10. So it's how much? It's 10 past 3 where they are.
I mean, I saw parts of it, and I thought his son's testimony was pretty revealing, but they like to dramatize the situation because the wife was cheating and
Well, that gives him pretty good motive. But
oh yeah.
what I read was that he didn't really know that she was cheating because he reached out to the cheateress, the lady who was married to the guy she was cheating with, and she said, no, everything's fine. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You started it, push play, Dungeon Master. I started what? Jamie started this trial. I didn't start anything.
Nope. Don't blame me.
I am filing a complaint with planning and cases in this, which is
You have to write it on
another
paper.
department that Jamie runs.
And there's a cylinder thing that looks like a trash can. That's where you file everything.
So I have to fly to Wisconsin and find out where you live and then throw it in the trash can.
A trash can, please. It's not a trash can. It's a filing system. It's very important.
Yeah, it's an outdoors filing system. No, I can't skip ahead when it's live. That's the big problem I have. I just skipped ahead the 10 minutes we were behind.
Yeah. I agree, Sue. Listening to the ME talk about it and then listening to the mechanical engineer talk about it, I have doubt. And, the whole situation itself, like, it's very possible that this was an accident.
But I have a hard time seeing how you couldn't push, because, again, and I like to play devil's,
Oh, yeah.
because we don't need to have everyone agreeing on everything. If you have the rake on the floor and then you have the containers over here with the little doggy poo up there, and she's standing on something. What the hell, Jamie? Someone outside of your
There's
house in an ambulance?
Ambulance just went by.
I didn't think anyone lived within 45 kilometers of your house.
They do. I have neighbors. There's a lot of people always dying around here. I think too, I think why I feel differently about it too, not only the ME and stuff for me, but if they ever get into this, which I don't know if they will, but if you see the time frame he would have had to do this, that too factors in for me to be like, that's a tough sell. Because again, he was with his son the whole time. And if I remember correctly, they want to say the son said he didn't see him for like 30 seconds or something like that. So it wasn't like a lot of time. So we're getting into this also time frame of how this all happened. But anyways.
I might have drawn her a little too short. But I don't understand why someone, when they're talking about, if she must have been on top of something, because there was two of those chemical things on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if she was standing on something, why couldn't he have run in there, pushed her, and she fell on the rake? But then, because I can't figure out how a push to her torso acts differently than her getting dizzy and falling off. That's the thing I don't get.
I mean, maybe it pushes your body into a different position is what she's calculating. I don't know. Because like think about like force. I don't know. Like all I can think of is like.
But there's a difference between if I do this to you, you'll fall backwards. If I run at you, and kind of like doing like a bench press, yeah, I'll send you flying. If she's just standing on a crate and he walks in there and just pushes her, but then again, if he's then back with his son within 30 seconds.
Yeah, it was a short time frame, very short time frame from what I remember.
Yeah.
So that's why it's very weird. But like what I'm thinking too is, okay, so like let's say somebody just falls back on their own versus being pushed back, because you would be, let's say they push you at your shoulders are going to go back first. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm like imagining in my head.
But if you're standing on a crate and then get dizzy and fall, will you then just take a flat back bump?
That's what I think, because I think you're not like.
But you're dizzy, so wouldn't you just? Because it sounded like her shoulders were contracted. So to me that would be more that your arms are out and back, and there's not room for her arms to be out and back in that small space. Because why would you fall backwards doing this? That would actually make sense if someone pushed you in your chest and you did what the? Where was she punctured? She was punctured on the top of her back.
Yeah, like that's what I'm kind of saying. FD Food Fairy, like in my mind, that's what.
You can go back and watch this morning, because we played it. You can't hear anything in the 911 call.
He just sounds frantic.
And that's the thing I don't understand, how you can calculate that there wouldn't be any additional force. Because it's embedded all the way through her torso. So how can you measure that she fell only with what was her body weight? That's the thing.
That's what they do.
I'm just asking questions. Because
Yeah.
if we can, if we're not here to say he's innocent or guilty or anything. We're here to try and see if we can make sense of it. And if I was on the jury, I would say she raises some good questions, but I also have some questions to her methodology, because why is a push to? She said above center of gravity would twist you, but it wouldn't. You'll just stumble backwards if I push you in the chest.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just
No, I don't know either. That's why I'm asking questions.
no, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to think out loud. Like, I don't know. Like, I think because I feel like sometimes when we fall, we hurt ourselves worse because we're trying to brace and we're twisting and we're doing weird things with our body all the time.
Yeah, but that's another thing, because we know she allegedly was feeling dizziness. So if she passes out, she'll just fall. But if she's awake, she'll brace. And that's because, as I understood it from this, she must have had her shoulders back when she fell on the rake. And why would you have your shoulders back if you're just slipping? I would be twisting and trying to get my arm down. That's why most fall accidents you have with old elderly people will bust their hip and their wrists, because they'll twist and try and take the fall on one side. Again, I don't know. I'm just asking questions.
Please be seated.
No,
You are
you're
allowed
right.
to ask questions as well. You
But
can send them to Jamie at IDGF 776 Wisconsin Avenue, Wisconsin.
Ms. Nichols Cook, are you ready with your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Applicant would call Tom Krogman.
Okay, Mr. Krogman, if you're ready, you may come forward. Have a seat in the chair to my left, please.
Well, it punched a hole in both sides of her chest cavities. That's actually quite effective, because your lungs will collapse.
And if you raise your hand, you swear the testimony you're about to give will be true and correct.
Yeah.
All right.
A hysterectomy.
If you turn the microphone in front of you
Yeah.
on, please. There's
when
a
you get
button
all
in the
your
bottom
lady
center.
parts taken out.
If you're banging everyone with a pulse within 10 miles, you probably should have a hysterectomy.
I think I have it.
Hi, Mr.
Yeah,
Krogman.
she has a lot of marks on her legs.
Can you
and
state
her
your name
arms
for
as
the
well.
record and spell your last name for the court reporter?
Thomas James Krogman, 1810 200th Avenue. Manchester.
If you want to see the autopsy photos, go to the Discord. Jemima has shared it in there.
Okay. And how do we spell Krogman?
Krogmann.
How long have you lived in Delaware County?
62 years.
Would
Forever.
that make you a lifelong resident?
Yeah,
What do you do for work or employment?
I'm a farmer.
What do you,
Yeah, but I can still ask questions, because I'm a layman. I'm not an expert.
what do you currently raise or grow as a farmer?
Corn and soybeans.
Yeah, I don't try to.
Have
math
you
is
raised
not my
livestock in the
thing.
past?
Yes,
Did that include hogs or cattle?
both.
Are you familiar with when farmers in Delaware County typically plant crops?
Yep.
When is that?
Yep.
Last year it was in April till someone's the middle of May.
Is it generally spring?
What's that?
Is it generally in the spring?
Yes, excuse me, yeah. Yeah. It was a really nice year last year.
Is it dependent on the weather?
Right.
This lady, she's not my favorite. My favorite attorney is High on a Hawk, or the prosecutor team from the Bradley Yawn case, just because they were sitting with the, oh my effing God, is this guy still talking? Look on their face. I think those are the best attorneys we've watched. High on the
No.
Hawk, just because he sounded like Colonel Klink.
You can never forget Rosemary Scapiccio.
Rosemary Scapiccio is also great.
She
was
is
a
phenomenal. And those
if
outfits. Woo!
if they kick Alan Jackson out, I want everyone to petition Rose Scapiccio to join the team.
Yes.
She will fight Bev in the courtroom.
Let's get Rosemary on the Karen Reed case. Oh my God, my dream would come true. That'd be amazing.
Everyone talking with a Bostonian accent, Jamie would die.
She is so wonderful.
In all fairness, he bought those cans into the world.
Yep.
Oh, her cans. Yeah, she had cans added on. Well, you know, sometimes you do the back garden, sometimes you do the Linnae.
When farmers are planting crops, how long are they in the field most days,
As long as it takes.
in your experience?
Sometimes 24 hours a day.
It's grumbling.
Ethan Van Sciver doesn't look that rough. And he dyes his beard as well, so.
When you plant crops, do you have Wi-Fi in the fields with you?
My cell phone? Yes.
Do you have anything else?
Oh,
Guidance systems on equipment?
And that would be data plans and things that you pay for?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how many years you had livestock?
Probably all of 30.
And are you familiar with farm equipment?
Yes,
Do you also repair equipment?
absolutely.
I want to ask you about a couple of things, and I have a couple of pictures to show you. The first one is going to be Exhibit 265. It looks like the TV went off.
It's like mine at home. Never works.
Oh, he's trying to be quippy.
Are you
Look
seeing
at him.
anything on your
He's
screen?
so proud of
Yes, I got
himself.
it now. Yes, correct.
What is it? What is on your screen?
We call that a corn fork.
Corn fork?
Corn rake.
Corn fork.
Do you use those terms interchangeably, corn rake and corn fork?
Yes.
What is it for?
It's for raking ear corn out of a crib, or it's just handy to have. It's like I don't know, it's like an extension of your hand a lot of times. You can reach out and pull lumber, bedding, whatever.
Have you used it to clean out a chicken coop?
No, I've never had chickens, but I've used it in farrowing houses and stuff like that.
And
Never had chicken?
is it a familiar or common object to see around a farm?
It's kind of like an antique. I mean, it's not nothing you'd use every day type thing. Grandpa had it, it's hanging on the rafter, and it's just a cool thing. You don't get rid of something like that.
Would you consider it a dangerous item?
No.
Would you consider it a sharp object?
I don't know. I never really considered it, I guess.
Would you want your grandchildren
I like
to stay far
regular
away from it?
witnesses.
I'm pretty sure I got one laying around, and I'm pretty sure they probably messed with it.
Okay. So you don't take any special precautions?
This guy is just like, why the hell am I here? I have Pabst Blue Ribbon and a truck to drive.
Yeah.
No,
regarding it?
no.
We've talked before you got here about augers. Can you tell us a little bit about what is an auger and specifically a sweep auger?
Well, it's a shaft with a spiral flighting on it that has usually a drive on the end that pulls your material to the motor and to the front. Let's say you're moving grain into a sump in an auger to load out. At the end of the bend, you would use that. Or,
This makes less sense to the lawyers than the bioengineer who just were there. It's a spiral that feeds stuff through a pipe.
silage, you would transport it from one place to another.
Where would you store an auger, a sweep auger?
Well, you should put them inside, but usually they're not.
When you say inside, you mean like in a barn? Or
Right, yeah.
Are they stored on the floor typically?
Yeah, they're heavy.
Heavy?
Yeah.
Hey,
you
Jake,
ever stepped on
welcome
one?
and good morning. You are joining a few of the other Aussies. Pixie was up very early to join us as well, but welcome, welcome, and have a great day at work. Hope the weather is fine and no alligators have attacked you yet.
Oh, yeah. I'm
What
sure,
happened?
I'm sure. Well, when it's running, oh,
No, when it's laying on the ground or in a shed.
I can't really say anything happened. Slip
Would-
probably.
Would parts of it move?
Oh, probably so. It's bearings on each end and belt drive to a motor.
Okay. Next, I'm going to ask that
so
we
it's-
pull up Exhibit 311,
so it's
which
just
we
a
looked at
conveyor
earlier
belt.
today. To make sure that you and I are talking about the same thing.
Yes, I have it.
Okay. I have this. I apologize. I can't see what you're looking for. Okay. Mr. Krogman, can you see a photo on your screen?
Yes.
Do you know what that picture is depicting?
I see a pet carrier and augers. Looks like sweep augers on the floor. Looks like some totes in the background, and I'm not quite sure what the thing is painted camouflage is. I can't really say.
Okay. And when you were just talking to us about sweep augers, that's what's also in that photo?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you know Todd Mullis?
Yes.
When did you meet Mr. Mullis?
I don't think he was old enough to drive yet.
So you've known him for a long time?
Yeah, I think he maybe is 14 or 15.
Okay.
Oh, he's a farm boy.
Are
He
you
was
familiar
driving
with
at
other
14.
members of the Mullis family?
Oh,
as well?
yes, absolutely.
Would you consider your family and their family to be neighbors or friendly?
Yes.
Over the years, what types of things would you and Todd do together?
We haven't really talked about that part. I haven't heard any testimony about that.
We did a lot of hunting together. We went kayaking, cookouts in the timber. I don't know, just things farm guys do, I guess, you know. Had a few beers here and there, you know.
When Todd married Amy, were you at the wedding?
Yes, I was in the wedding.
Did Todd and Amy bring their kids around camping or to barbecues with you?
Yes.
Have you ever seen Todd get into a fight?
No.
I want to kind of orientate you to like 2018 and that fall. Were you still in regular communication with Todd?
Not very often.
Did you see him and did you talk to him about farm work?
Yeah, but I would say in the last, I don't know how many years, you know, life gets busy and we didn't get to hang out. We didn't, I don't know, he had his things going, I had mine. I didn't really answer your question probably, but
Do you know if Todd was also planting crops in 2018?
I'm sure he was.
Do you know if he was harvesting?
Absolutely.
Do you know if he had a hog farm operation in 2018?
Absolutely. I was somewhat in touch with him, you might say. I knew he sold chemicals and just, you know.
when you talk about selling chemicals, are those also for farm work?
Yes,
And the picture you looked at, or the one that might still be up, the totes that you mentioned, are those for chemicals?
yes.
Do you know if those totes are heavy?
Are the totes heavy?
No.
They weigh about 125 pounds empty. I know because I use them for scrap iron, and I gotta weigh them back empty.
Gotcha.
I love this guy.
He's just so wholesome.
I want to talk
This is
now
Valhalla in
about
10 years.
November 10th, 2018. Do you remember what you were doing that day?
That was the day of the accident. I was, my son and me were about, I'm gonna say, a half mile from my nephew's place, and we were loading scrap iron off a farm, and we seen ambulance, or not ambulance, we seen flashing lights to the east on 38, and we're looking, and I was like, well, wonder what's going on, and then town officer, town cop, whatever, he flew by on the highway, which is way out of city limits, which was, we thought was pretty odd. So we grabbed the binoculars and looked, and we looked to the east where my nephew's place is. He's just building a house there, and we seen like, well, it looked like that's where the activity was. So we hopped in the truck and headed down. We figured, excuse me, there was a skid loader accident or something. They were building a house. You move a lot of dirt, debris, lumber, everything with loaders, whatnot. And you want the whole story?
Well, I'll ask you another question
Okay.
before there's an objection.
Want the whole story?
What was the name of your son that you were with that day?
Michael.
Michael. And what is the name of your nephew who lived on 38?
Brian.
Brian. And so you and Michael both went down the road to where the squad cars or the deputy lights were?
Yes.
Okay. You said that you thought it was an accident. You knew Brian was building a house, and you talked about a skid loader. For clarity of the record, can you tell us a little bit about what is a skid loader?
It's probably the most awesome machine ever built. You can do anything with it. You move dirt, you can mow, mowers, backhoe attachments. There's nothing you can't do with a skid loader.
Can I call it a smaller tractor?
No, it's just not. I've never heard them called anything else but a skid loader.
Is it a heavy machine?
Yes. 12,000 pounds probably.
Okay. Is it something that you can take on the road?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is fascinating, but it's not relevant.
Oh my God.
I guess Ms. Nichols-Cook, as far as the relevancy,
This is
is there some reason you think it's
fascinating.
relevant?
I guess I'm trying to lay the foundation for why he expected there to be a skid loader accident and why he went there so quickly. So I could just ask him why he was worried about a skid loader accident?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Krogman, when you thought there would have been a skid loader accident at your nephew's house, was that upsetting or alarming to you?
I don't really think it was either. It was just a matter we had to get there and fix the situation.
Were you afraid somebody was hurt?
Right. They wouldn't have called.
She's a lawyer.
Could a skid loader accident seriously injure somebody?
Very much so.
Have you seen other skid loader accidents?
I've seen it with the same type attachment on tractors where same scenario, they're building a new house. The wife was down in the trench and the tractor didn't stop and it pretty much cut her in half.
Okay.
And I'm sure a skid loader do the same thing. You don't know. There's a lot of stuff goes through your head when it's at your nephew's place.
Yes, I'm.
Really quick too.
Yeah. Have you yourself been involved in any accidents while farming or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any one of those guys sitting back there been in an accident. Oops.
Are accidents common?
Yes.
On a farm?
Yes. It's a dangerous job. I mean, we don't have to play by OSHA or any of that ruling, and we got so much time to get this done, and we just do it. And sometimes you lose a finger.
And just people sometimes die in a farming accident.
Yes.
I love this guy.
So when you
I mean,
got to
sometimes
Brian's
you just lose that finger.
Property,
Yeah.
what
it
did you
happens.
see?
It happens.
I seen what looked like a car accident.
Did you recognize anybody?
I noticed Todd's truck.
Okay. Did you see Todd?
Yep, he was standing outside. Well, yeah, yes,
Did you see deputies?
yes.
Did you see Amy Mullis?
On the ground, yes.
Was anything happening to Amy at the time?
I think I don't know if they're doing the chest compressions or what. I can't say for sure.
Was EMS there yet?
I can't say for sure.
And did you speak with Todd?
No, yeah, absolutely.
And did you ask or inquire about what had happened?
Yes,
Okay. Have you been
Sometimes
to
you just
Todd
lose a
Mullis's
finger.
farm before?
Yeah, sometimes.
absolutely.
Are you familiar with a shed between the hog barns and the house?
The red shed, I've been in it. I don't know, 10 years ago probably. I bought a tote from him on a winter day. I needed a tote, but that's the only time I've ever been in that shed.
Do you have any recollection from that time you were in the shed, how much space was in it or what was stored in it?
It was full. I was just helping him out by taking a tote.
So the totes that you identified in the photo were in those types of totes?
Yes, yes.
At some point, did you learn that Amy had been found in that shed?
Yes,
And at some point, did you learn that there had been a corn rake involved?
yes, I did.
Did that
So we're like, well,
strike
that'll
you
happen.
as unusual or strange?
I'm going to object as relevance. This witness's opinion on whether that's unusual or strange is not relevant to the issues before the court.
Overruled.
You can answer.
Yeah, let him answer.
Would you repeat it, please?
The information that you learned that Amy had been found in the shed and that a corn rake had been involved in her injury, was that a strange thing to you or a suspicious thing to you?
It was odd. I mean, anytime there's no there's no normal accident. I mean, you've all seen accidents. You can't make sense of it. It's like, why did this happen? So, I mean, I don't know how I should answer that for you.
In your experience as a lifelong, member of this community and as a farmer, did you have any thought that this wasn't an accident?
I'm going
No.
to object as improper opinion testimony.
I'm not asking for an expert opinion. I'm asking in his personal experience, just like if I asked a witness, how fast was that car going?
Objection's overruled. I heard an answer. Did you, Kelly? Yeah, it'll remain in the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you learn at some point while you were in Brian's driveway that Todd had been on the way to the hospital with Amy?
Yes, I talked to Todd.
Have you ever had to drive a family member to the hospital that was injured?
Yes.
Why do you not wait for an ambulance to come to you?
That's not how we're wired.
Jamie, is this work flannel, church flannel?
It's his court flannel. Love it.
We fix stuff. There's no time to. Well, I think I don't know how many times I did it. Once I comes to recollection with my brother, He was back in the timber. It was in the spring. You couldn't even walk. It was so muddy. And he was unconscious and his leg was bent behind him, bleeding. There's no way you were going to get him out of there unless we did it.
What?
So,
And we,
in your experience, is it impractical to wait for an ambulance to get to you?
I would, yeah.
Sorry, cotton plate.
There's probably scenarios where not, but in most scenarios, we fix stuff. We don't wait for nothing.
Was Todd with you the day that your brother broke his leg?
Yes, he was.
And did he help you take your brother to the
Absolutely.
hospital?
I think he rode in the back of the truck and held him down.
So on November 10th, when you're in Brian's driveway, do you see an ambulance come?
I don't recall seeing this. Guess I really wasn't paying too much attention to that part of it, because they were working on Amy, and I can't tell you if there was 5 squad cars there or 50 squad cars. I couldn't tell you.
Did you see Amy leave in an ambulance?
Yes.
Okay. Did you and Todd get in the ambulance?
No.
Why not?
Todd rode in with me because I think it was
No, this is the neighbor. She was banging some other guy who worked at the farm, allegedly.
too full.
Yeah.
They didn't have room for
Did you make any observations that you can remember about Todd's demeanor or his behavior?
I think he was in disbelief.
Do you know Tristan Mullis?
Yes.
Did you see him on November 10th, 2018?
Yes.
Did you drive Todd to the hospital that day?
Yes.
Did you stay at the hospital?
Yes, I did.
Most time, if you have a minor accident, they will tell you go to the hospital, because why wait? This is a very big emergency, but again, you should always act correct in every situation if you're part of a crime. What if he was thinking, oh, this is just like when the neighbor's brother broke his leg. I'm going to get her to the hospital. They're going to fix her. I would do the same. I would chuck them in the back of the car. I wouldn't sit there and say, oh, I'll better call the ambulance. Let's get out of here.
Well, especially if you live far away, because I know how long it can take for them to even get there. And you could be halfway to the hospital before they even leave get close to you. So
she was a serial cheat. She allegedly had some affair in 2015 with someone at the hospital. Then she was banging some officer, and the last one was someone who worked at the farm or something like that. Well, I don't know if he might have come over just to shake off the cobwebs, as they say.
Do you know where you went in the hospital?
No, some small room.
Would it be like a waiting room?
It could be, yeah.
Did you stay with Todd?
Yes, I did.
Were you there when a doctor came out and informed Todd that Amy had passed?
Yes.
Did you see deputies coming in and out of that waiting room?
Yes, I did.
Were you present for any conversations the deputies had with Todd or Tristan Mullis?
I don't think so. I don't recall anything.
Did you observe anything about the medical staff's behavior? Anything that you remember about how they acted towards you and Todd?
I'm going to say cold.
Did you feel that was that a concern to you?
I know rolled off me pretty easy, but you just got that feeling of
Did you
of
recognize?
coldness.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Did you recognize any of the medical staff as someone you knew?
No, I didn't know any of them.
Did you know that Amy used to work in that hospital?
Yes, I did.
Did you see other members of?
Trial TV Live did a replay around Christmas.
Mullis family come to the hospital?
Yes, I did.
At some point, did you and your wife Carol then leave the hospital?
Yeah, we left together, yes.
Before Amy died, I know you said you had more limited interactions or time with Todd. At any point, did you and Todd ever discuss Amy having an extramarital affair?
No,
Do you have other friends in the community?
a few.
Do you sometimes hear people talk or rumors about
Oh, absolutely.
affairs?
Oh, absolutely.
He's like the old biddies from
Did you
the Black
also
Widow
talk to
trial.
Amy directly
I
over the
heard
years,
that.
or text, or call her, or talk to her?
No.
When Amy and the family and Todd would come for barbecues or campouts or anything, did you ever hear Amy complain about being unhappy?
No.
Did you ever hear Todd complain about his marriage or about wanting a divorce?
No.
Well, then he wasn't married if he
Couple
wasn't
more quick
complaining about
questions
it.
on November 10th. I know it was Iowa in November. Do you remember weather-wise, if it was cold?
Yes.
Do you know if there was any snow on the ground?
Yes, there was. Because we had commented loading the skid loader on that trailer, how sketchy it was. It's on tracks and it don't like a wet bed, that's snow on it.
When you were doing your scrap metal job at the farm by Brian's, were you walking around outside in the snow?
Yes,
Were you leaving prints, shoe
I'm sure we
prints?
were.
Do you remember a DCI agent coming to your home to talk to you?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember approximately when that was after Amy's death?
It was cold out.
If I told you the report from the agent is December 28th, 2018, would you accept that?
Yeah.
Do you remember having this discussion?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember the name of the agent?
No.
Have you had a chance to listen to the audio of your interview with him?
Yes, I did.
Do you know where on your property that interview is occurring?
Yes, I do.
Where at?
Right in the shop.
In the shop?
Yep.
Is the shop a large building?
Yes, very.
What are you doing there?
Everything.
Objection is overruled. The answer will remain in the record.
We do everything in there from snowmobiles to four-wheel drive tractors.
Were any of your children or grandchildren on the farm that day with you?
Yes, they were.
Were any of them in the shop?
At one point,
No, but the new Danish guy got kicked out.
they weren't supposed to be, but he wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to come back at 5 o'clock, but he was too impatient, so I had to leave my grandkids in the house. So I had to talk to him then. And one of them slipped out. And
Do your grandkids play in the shop sometimes?
absolutely.
Slipped out.
Do they ride their bikes or roller skate or?
All of it. Pickleball, segways, I got it all.
Do you remember the DCI agent talking to you about how Amy died?
Vaguely.
Do you remember him using a term that the medical examiner's decision that it was a homicide was gospel?
Yes.
Gospel.
That's a weird thing to say.
What did you understand that to mean to you?
I didn't really pay too much attention to it, I guess.
Did you have an impression that law enforcement had already decided who killed Amy?
Absolutely.
Do you know who they thought it was?
Yes. They had the finger pointed at Todd the whole time.
Do you remember talking with the agent about your thought that it was an accident?
I'm sure I did, because I don't know if you guys want to listen to this or not, but as while I was at the scene, Todd told me what happened, and today he will still tell me that same exact story, that you cannot tell that twice, and it has not faltered one word from the day at the incident. You can't do it.
Mr. Krogman, does it make sense to you that Amy could have slipped and fallen on that corn rake?
That's
Object is relevant.
He has
And
no
speculation.
medical expertise, so yeah.
Objection is sustained. That answer will be stricken from the record.
Do you recall telling DCI that it didn't make any sense that it was a homicide?
Yes, I did.
Do you
That's how I
remember
see
what
it too,
DCI
Sue.
wanted you to do?
It was pretty obvious what he was out there for.
What was that?
He wanted me to put some dirt on Todd that I didn't have none.
Sounds like the community is behind him. That they think the cops pinned him.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Todd get in a fight with someone?
No.
Ask and answered.
Are you aware of any evidence that Amy's death was a murder?
No evidence at all.
In your experience growing up on a farm and farming, do your kids help with farm chores?
Interesting.
Yes, when they were from little on, they did everything.
So would you have a 13-year-old helping you prep a hog barn?
Absolutely.
Overruled.
Would you let a child use a corn rake?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure they have.
You are aware that Todd was arrested for Amy's murder in 2019?
Yes.
Do you know who Bob Sabers is?
Yes, I do.
Did you ever talk to him about your presence at Brian's house on November 10th?
I don't think so.
Did you ever talk with a Jake Firehome?
I don't think I know that person.
I think that's the guy she was banging.
Were you willing to talk to Todd's attorneys if they needed to talk to you?
Absolutely.
Did you attend any of Todd's criminal trial in September of 2019?
Yes.
And did you watch any of it online?
I think all of it.
What was your impression of the trial?
Objection, relevance. This witness's opinion of the trial is irrelevant.
Yeah,
Sustained.
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you recall hearing defense counsel's opening argument in the trial?
Yes.
How did you feel after you heard that?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
It has nothing to, come on now, this is stupid.
As a farmer, do you see a lot of life and death?
Yes.
Do you also know the anatomy of the livestock you raise?
Absolutely.
Is there significant differences between the anatomy or the organs of a body of a hog and a person?
No.
Have you ever had to Google the anatomy of a person?
Objection, relevance.
that was an issue in the Google searches at trial, and this is being presented to show what counsel could have and should have put on at trial to combat that.
However, Mr. Krogman's need to Google something is not relevant to that
I
determination.
Google a lot of
He is a
body
farmer
parts
just like Mr. Mullis, and it was alleged that Mr. Mullis conducted that search.
on the
So I think it's
house.
directly relevant.
The objection is overruled. Was there an answer, Kelly?
Have you ever had to Google or search the organs of a body?
No. We've actually done autopsies on hogs. When you have livestock, second nature, you turn into a veterinarian. So when something happens, you open the animal up and you see if that is the reason this critter died on you. And if you don't, then you have the veterinarian.
Just one moment.
How many hogs have DNT opened up just to check if that
Over the
reason
years
why the critter died?
of your friendship with Todd, did you ever observe any behavior that you would consider to be mistreatment of Amy or the kids?
No.
Do you know if you told the DCI agent your opinion on how Amy Mullis died?
Objection, hearsay.
I'm asking if he remembers if he told her.
Question.
I'm not asking what he told her.
The question was as to the witnesses.
How many critters have you opened up to look if the person you just unalived, if it could? No.
Opinion.
If he remembers telling Turbot if he had an opinion about how Amy died.
The objection's overruled.
No, they are
can
trying to get
answer.
into why he Googled something.
I'm quite sure I did.
Mr. Krogman, when you were with the DCI agent, do you recall any other statements that the DCI agent or like what he was asking you to do in regards to Todd?
I'm sure he was looking for some dirt on him, but I had none. I told him, I said, I'm worthless to you, man, because I have nothing for you.
Do you
He
remember
is looking for some dirt.
a part of the conversation or the interview where the agent wants you to like sleep on it?
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you remember what he wanted you to sleep on?
I'm kind of fuzzy on it. I really am.
Okay.
I mean, when you tell me, yeah, it comes back to me, but I can't recall all that long ago.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Krogman.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. You were discussing your interview with Special Agent John Turbot on direct examination. I just have some follow-up questions about that specifically. So that occurred in December of 2018. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
During that interview, you indicated to Special Agent Turbot that you hadn't spent much time with Todd and Amy in 10 to 15 years. Does that sound right?
Probably so.
So you would see them occasionally, but not a regular thing?
Not like we did earlier before they had children.
You also described your relationship with Mr. Mullis as you were his best friend. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we were really good friends. Still are.
What was that?
We still are good friends.
Thank you. You were asked to describe Todd and Amy's marriage, and you referenced that there were a lot of oddities. What did you mean by that?
I'm going to object because I don't believe that was the testimony, the oddities in the marriage. Is that what the question was?
Yeah, he didn't say that.
Let me rephrase my question then to make it clear. In your interview with Agent Turbit, you described Todd and Amy's marriage as having a lot of oddities. Do you recall saying that?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
If you had indicated that, what would you have meant by oddities?
He didn't say.
Your Honor, if I could object and
I
ask
don't know.
counsel to clarify for the record if he's referring to the audio of the interview or the written report by Turbit? The narrative, do you know where it comes from? It's the narrative? Okay. Thank you, Your Honor, I'm sorry.
Allegedly, they claimed it during the first trial. We heard the 911 this morning audio. It could be clearer in court. I don't know. I heard where you at, hospital, park the car. That's what I got from the 911 call. Allegedly, you could hear him calling her the B word. I didn't hear it. I heard something about parking and going to the hospital and driving a car.
Mr. Bakke, I think maybe if you can re-ask the question at this time.
If you had described any peculiarities, oddities, whatever word you happen to use, would there be a reason for that?
I don't think they spent a lot of time together because all he did was work and she worked at the hospital. So I don't think, I don't know, I guess it just seemed kind of odd to me. They didn't have that much time to spend together.
You indicated that I believe that they'd been married for a while, so maybe it kind of, sorry, I don't want to mince your words here. But you were aware of some concerns about Amy being unfaithful to Todd, is that fair?
I wasn't concerned about nothing.
Were you aware of it?
I heard rumors, but as far as, I don't know how you want me to answer that. If I believed every rumor I heard, he wouldn't do it.
In the time leading up to this incident on November 10th, 2018, I believe you told DCI agent Turbit that in the 5 years before that, Mr. Mullis had not brought up Amy's name. Does that sound right?
I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry. I don't.
Would that surprise you? Would you have any reason to dispute that?
I don't know how I should answer that. I don't really know what he's getting at.
Didn't bring up her name in 5 years. That was a weird thing to... Is it because he called her the old ball and chain? Is it because he'd never talked about her? Is it because he called her the love of my life? I don't know. If he's such a good friend, maybe he didn't use her name. He knew who the wife was. Again, context is king in statements like that.
And these old country boys, do they sit around and talk about ladies? Or they're just like...
Yeah, they probably are saying, well, the old dishwasher at the home was making a lot of noise, so I had to come over here today.
You don't know who's getting it.
Turbit was getting
So you don't remember much of your conversation with Agent Turbit? Is that what?
Well, you know how long ago that's been. Quite a while. And no, I do not remember everything that was said.
But sir, you remember whether your footprints were covered up or were showing in the snow on the day of this incident, but you don't remember your conversation about it?
With him? No, I don't remember it with him, but you're saying that you don't think I had footprints in the snow? I don't remember that, or what are you asking
What
me?
are you getting at here? What are you getting at?
We'll move on.
Why are you moving on if you had a question?
Yeah.
You discussed what Mr. Mullis had told you about the incident involving Amy that led to Amy's death, right?
Right.
And Mr. Mullis told you that he had to remove the corn rake from Amy's body because the handle was 8 feet long. Does that sound right?
Objection, can I ask the foundation of where this comes from?
Yeah.
Yes, this is from the same interview that we've been referencing.
Can we have just a moment?
Sure.
An 8 feet long rake. That's a long rake.
I'll ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Come on, fella. Just let it go. It's so clear. I have been wanting all day getting a shot from the back of the courtroom so we could see it in the light. That's no reason to keep. Don't stop lying to yourself. You're like Plevin when he says that he has sources that know stuff about the Karen Reed case. It's just give it up. It's a lie.
Does. He's very well. He's very well versed.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I hear you.
Mr. Krogman, just to be clear for the record, you were not personally present when Amy Mullis became injured. Is that right?
Right.
You don't know exactly what happened, even though you have your own speculation, right?
Yes.
So much of your testimony today was based on the fact that you have your own hypothesis of what may or may not have occurred.
Yeah, like everyone in here does. Has an idea what happened. Yes, exactly.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything further. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Hi, buddy.
Any further witnesses today?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else that we should take up, or are we ending for the day?
We should discuss the schedule tomorrow, Your Honor, but I don't know if the court wants to do that in chambers.
I think we probably can.
Sorry. There's one brief scheduling thing that might be best since we're done a little early that we could talk about in chambers, and then I believe the court indicated it wanted to make a record briefly about discussions that we had on Monday. I don't know if this would be a good time or if that was still needed.
Well, we can at some point. Yeah, we can talk back in chambers about whether we do that this afternoon or later, and then we'll see where we're at maybe with regard to the NIE exhibits. But just make sure I keep a running list of my notes of things that we need to clean up at some point. We'll plan on recessing for the day and picking back up at 9 in the morning. Have a good night. Thank you.
Well. Aw, look at him, his little flannel. What are you doing?
I'm just answering an idiot. An anti-Karen Reed. I really got into the short boss Smurf's head today. I like it.
Oh, Lord.
She said I should eat some more blue pills because the Fed case is done and Plevin's right and blah blah blah. And I said I'm more of a red pill kind of guy. Blue pills is for officers who stuff their skinny jeans when they arrest people and who butt dial people after a night on whiskey. It's Viagra, Jamie.
No,
So
that's what that is.
And then I had another one who said my stream was pure comedy. So I had to say thank you for watching.
Aw,
That's
such a nice thing to say.
I love that even the short pause Smurfs stopped by. It means we make good content.
Mhm.
Probably because we have Valhalla on. But what do I know? I just love these idiots. 2 days ago, the case is done. The feds have said it. Now it's, Jackson is done because he clearly lied. And tomorrow it's, I don't know.
There'll always be something.
Yeah, and then she said, "Oh, you forgot the 227. You forgot the carpet, Karen." No, it has nothing to do with my absolute trust in Plevin. I, for one, trust Plevin 100%. He has multiple sources, and as I say, he's only wrong 99.99999% of the time.
Yeah.
So I trust him more than anyone. I hope you do too, Jamie.
I
I
do.
don't think our relationship could survive if you didn't believe Plevin.
I believe every word.
Oh,
So-
Plevin, you came and you gave me a hot take on your vacation away from addict, where you live with your mom and your daddy. Oh, I love you, sweet Plevin. You look like a thumb, and you are really dumb, but you're funny.
Aw.
We need some clowns, oh, Plevin. I'm sorry. Oh, Mandy, you came and you gave me a turkey on my vacation away from worky. Such a great song. If the witnesses today is to be believed, yes, there could be some reasonable doubt in this case. Is it enough to get it back? I don't know. I like the smiley lawyer. I don't like the other one. I think she asked questions a weird way. But I think
She's trying to be too smart sometimes.
yeah, and she gets too convoluted. It's the same thing that happened to Baby Lawyer with the last guy. If you're having a salt of the earth kind of guy, you don't say, perchance, do you, in a roundabout way, if you think about it, could you then maybe, without going into too many specifics, but still hitting all the specifics, tell me, what if any, and this guy's just sitting there thinking, I could be hoeing my backyard today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was supposed to be announced yesterday, but the reason why he didn't announce it yesterday was because Alessi talked too much. I read that online too. Let them have it. It's no better than everyone on the Free Can Read side was believing Sean on the golf when he said the feds will stop this trial before it ever starts. That's why I say let's make fun of all the short boss Smurfs on the twit and see what happens. Let's read the book and see what happens instead of believing everything we hear, because the only thing I trust is Plevin, because Plevin is always right, and Jamie, because I'm contractually obliged to do that.
That is true.
One thing I don't trust is the feds. And I don't trust anyone who has sources, because most of the time those sources is I heard it on the grapevine. Much longer would you be mine. That's another song, Jamie. I'm
That's
getting a
good.
little overtired.
Yeah, it's late for you.
Yeah, it's a 11:15. Tomorrow we will be doing this morning stream at 1 p.m. We will be having a stream. I don't know if Jamie will participate. I hope she will. Where we will be talking about the Coburger case, because I don't know anything about it. All of you always talk about it and say it's a very interesting case. So tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, Julio Law has been so kind that she wants to come on. And the Coburger case is kind of like the Karen Reed case. There are more rumors out there than facts. So we will try and keep it as fact oriented as possible. And I'm pretty sure that you heard from a special source that actually we will try and keep it to the facts that she can kind of say is more or less verified. It's kind of like in the Karen Reed case, there's a lot of stuff we can't see, can't hear, can't do anything about, because the judge is very weird in that case as well. So we'll do talk as much about it as we can. So if that has your interest, or you can participate with something, please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. and I can learn about the coke, because what I know is someone went into a house and unalived, I believe, 4 people, and someone saw someone with a vacuum cleaner, and they found a K-bar. That's all I know about that case. And as you know, I don't do my homework. I only trust one source, Coco Beware. I don't trust Coco Beware because, well, I do trust him. I don't trust The Undertaker because he almost ruined Coco Beware by dropping him with his first tombstone. Hulk Hogan lied about the tombstone he got, but Coco Beware was dropped on his neck and probably ended his career, or at least cut it short. Damn you, Mark Calloway. I should have a wrestling podcast, Jamie.
You really should.
Yeah, me and
I feel
Valhalla
like
just talking about
you, Valhalla, Lefty he knows all about this.
I can't talk to Lefty. I'm not saying that Doink is smarter than him, but Doink's smarter than Lefty.
Yeah, Lefty.
Doink, for any of you who
Hamish
needs
Sonberg.
something, because there's nothing really I can redirect you to. I am updating, trying to see if anyone is live. Everyone that's live right now, there's people covering this trial. But Doink was signing off on his live stream yesterday on X. Somehow it got stopped before, but he then went live again and read something he wrote. It's probably some of the best writing I have ever heard. And he reads it like, you should go check it out. Doink is, next to Plevin, the only other person I trust on this planet. If Doink says it, some people are sharing a picture today that looks like someone looking like Doink got arrested in Massachusetts today. Could be fun. Yeah, I think Plevin has a sad elephant. Jamie, that's a weird thing to say.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say, Baker.
Yeah. I don't know why you say stuff like that. But we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern for more of this riveting trial coverage. Marissa yells at me if I don't pick it up. And again, 1 p.m. we will then do some Coburger. Hopefully, you will all have a wonderful night and see us tomorrow.
What exhibit are you referring to?
I'm going to make this 100, Your Honor.
All right.
100.
100.
Because it is 100%
100%.
correct.
Objection, Your Honor.
So you literally built a cannon?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
All right, I'm in love.
Go back. Please do that again. Oh, that was the cutest thing I've ever seen.
While I'm waiting for this, did you, whether it's
You
true or
should
not,
have Ralphie
believe
on
Mr.
and
Randolph
talk
had
about
slept
all
with
the
your wife?
injuries you can get on a farm.
I wouldn't care.
You wouldn't have cared?
No,
Did you believe he had slept with your wife?
no.
Did you believe he slept with your
Barnyard
mother-in-law?
injuries
Oh,
on
we
a
did.
budget with Danny
Everybody
G
has.
and Ralphie Sunday at 12.
Everybody has.